The time is 6:30, and I'd like to welcome everyone back to open session. And to begin, can I ask everyone to rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Our first item is public participation. Marilyn, do we have people signed up?
We do.
Okay, great, thank you. So thank you for attending tonight's meeting. As is the case with all our meetings, there are two opportunities for public participation. The first is for individuals who signed up prior to the meeting, and for those who wish to speak during our second opportunity at the end of the meeting, please see Mary Lynn Muscolino, who is just outside the room, to fill out a blue form. Please understand that the board appreciates hearing from our community, but cannot engage in dialogue or discussion during our meeting. If there is a comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. In accordance with board policies 2230 and 830, we appreciate you limiting your comments to 3 minutes and for keeping tonight's meeting respectful and civil. Marilyn, will you please call our first speaker?
Kathy McCarthy.
Good evening. My name is Kathy McCarthy. I'm one of the Willow Springs residents who filed a request for review that led to the recent Attorney General determination. In addition to being your Willow Springs neighbor, professionally, I have over 10 years legal experience working with public bodies, advising them about the compliance with FOIA and the Open Meetings Act. I don't know how this board got in a place where it violated the Open Meetings Act on 9 dates and had hours of improper closed discussions. Clearly, this was not a one-time conversation that accidentally strayed off course. This was a systematic neglect of the state's Open Meetings Act. As you consider next steps, I would like to offer a piece of advice that I kept in the back of my mind while working with public bodies, and that is, transparency always wins. This sounds very simplistic, but time and time again, when a public body fails to disclose information that should be public, it is the act of shielding that information that becomes the worst transgression going forward. I would like to use an example from my professional experience of how to right a wrong. Several years ago, I worked as the FOIA administrator for the University of Illinois system. During an internal investigation, it was discovered that the then chancellor of the Urbana campus used a personal email address to conduct university business for the specific purpose of circumventing FOIA. Once it was discovered, the president of the university did not want to hide this wrongdoing and was committed to being fully transparent. So what did we do? First, we voluntarily put all emails from this private account that concern university business on a dedicated university webpage. Then our office called the public access counselor in the Attorney General's office, explained the discovery and how we were remedying it. The result of our call was not how could this have happened, but thank you for being proactive and doing the right thing. Not done yet, we called every reporter that on the university beat, as well as every FOIA requester who had sought the chancellor's emails. Again, rather than being upset about it, everyone thanked us for acknowledging the wrongdoing and making amends. Legally, professionally, and ethically, it was simply the right thing to do. Yes, there were news reports, but the university's reputation with the Attorney General, the media, and most importantly, the public, was strengthened. And the university president that had the courage to make that call is the same university president there today. Transparency always wins. I share this story in the hope you remember that it's the actions taken after wrongdoing that demonstrate an institution's values. Sometimes you just have to rip the Band-Aid off, admit a mistake, and take steps to fix it. You know now the closed sessions you had regarding this property were wrong and should never have taken place. A full release of the tapes as prescribed by the Attorney General's office is the only way to remedy these errors. Anything less, and you're needlessly sacrificing the school's reputation. Don't let defiance of the Illinois Attorney General and the residents you've taken an oath to represent be your enduring legacy. Thank you.
Jim DeStasio.
My name is Jim DeStasio, and I'm a Willow Springs resident. I know the board has a statement later in the meeting concerning the Illinois Attorney General's determination that the board violated the Open Meetings Act another 8 times while discussing behind closed doors plan to turn the land near my home, my children's school, and our neighborhood park into an industrial facility. I wanted to speak at the outset to remind the board how we got to this point. For years now, you declined to be honest and upfront about how your sales efforts started, the bidders you worked closely with, and the extent to which you unlawfully met behind closed doors. Your lack of transparency forced our community to file countless FOIAs and inquiries with the Attorney General, resulting in this sizable ruling against this board and its practices. You wasted so much district time and taxpayer resources defending a bad strategy. We're here not just because you violated the Open Meeting Act across hours worth of discussions. We're here because you also violated your oath and the trust between an elected board and those it represents. Vice President Alvarez, Board Member Struing, and the new board member that will be seated today, I would like to address you directly, if I may. You were not here when these transgressions took place and are not to blame for what happened in the past. This issue has been a boat anchor tied around this board for 2 years now. As the board weighs how to remedy these violations, I ask the three of you not to wrap that anchor around yourselves. Anything other than the full release of these recordings will irrevocably tie you to the poor decisions of the past. It's unfair, but your reputations are now on the line too, and your actions on this issue will follow you during your tenure here and beyond. Do you want to stand for openness, for transparency, and for collaboration? Or do you want to be associated with sweeping wrongdoing under the carpet and defying the Illinois Attorney General? President Gretsch, board members Dillon, Daniels, and Thomas, and Superintendent Waterman, you were here when these meetings took place. You participated in them, and you have not taken accountability for what transpired. Your actions hurt our community, and you've never taken a meaningful step to make this district whole again. The Attorney General has offered you a remedy and a path forward. Release the recordings of all the closed sessions that should have been held in public, and let's finally move on from this. As strongly as I've disagreed with how you've handled your first attempt at a land sale, I'm sure you believed everything you did behind closed doors was in the best interest of this school. But if you somehow choose to suppress those conversations in light of the Illinois Attorney General ruling, you won't be doing that for the school. You'll only be doing that for yourselves. There is zero benefit to the institution of Lyons Township High School for you to shun transparency and ignore the Illinois Attorney General. Anything other than the full release of these recordings will result in an admission that this board, the one sitting here right now, sadly remains in the practice of hiding information it deems inconvenient to itself. Don't tarnish the reputation of Lyons Township High School because you couldn't acknowledge a mistake and accept the consequences. Be an example of open and ethical leadership for the students you serve. Let's close this unfortunate chapter in district history and let's move forward. Release the tapes. Thank you.
Fred Whiting.
Good evening. So regarding the Attorney General's decision that a total of 10 closed meetings broke the law, Jill Gretsch, Jill Daniels, Michael Thomas, Carrie Dillon, and Brian Waterman all broke their oath to serve the community honorably. How can we trust you going forward if you cannot own up to your mistakes and take the appropriate actions to heal this community? Jill Gretsch will administer the same oath to the new board member tonight. Should this be taken seriously? What are the recordings about? A plot to destroy the Pleasantdale community with an industrial complex with total disregard for all the hardworking taxpayers that built that community with the majority of their life's work. Yes, tell us what you really think. Release the tapes and prove us wrong. Did you not knowingly deceive your constituents in order to do something you knew would not be acceptable to the taxpayers of Pleasantdale? Be transparent. Humble yourselves, as we all have to do from time to time. Let us collectively understand how this came to be such a huge waste of everybody's time, having to defend against what is clearly a short-sighted attempt at sacrificing one community over others. Was it poor legal advice, poor leadership from the then board president, Carrie Dillon, an ill-fated plan by Stachek and Waterman, who, by the way, don't live in the district, for a quick money grab? How did this come to be? Since initiating this deception, you now have had 5 different board members and 3 different board presidents. This, to me, is clearly dysfunctional. Let's move past this unfortunate chapter in LT's history and do what is right to reunite this community. Live up to your self-imposed standards of transparency and collaboration, which you tout all the time. Now is your chance to honor the commitment to your strategic plan, goal number 4, which is, I quote, build confidence and engagement with families and the communities through improved communications, collaboration, and transparency. This is the moment to cleanse LT of this ugly past and retake your oath. Retake your oath to honorably serve the LT community. And now the 3 new board members not involved may be asked to vote on whether to protect this unlawful behavior or side with the law and the Attorney General and show the proper respect for our community that has been so badly disrespected. The remedy is clear. Release the recordings of all 8 meetings per the Attorney General's request, and also issue a public apology from Waterman, State Check, and the board. Thank you.
That concludes our public comments for this portion.
All right, thank you. So we will begin our meeting this evening with a new business action item, which is the appointment of a new board member and oath of office. After publicly announcing the board vacancy created by the resignation of Alvia Nava, the board began the process and publicized the search for a new board member. The board received 9 applications for the open position and conducted 7 interviews in closed session during 2 closed sessions on October 21st and October 22nd. At this time, it is our pleasure to appoint the selected candidate. Can I please have a motion to appoint Joya Giannotti Fry to fill the vacancy on the Board of Education created by the resignation of Alvia Nava until a successor is elected and seated following the April 2025 consolidated election?
So moved.
Second?
Marilyn, can we have a roll call, please?
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Sterling?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Gretsch?
Yes. All right. At this time, I ask Joya Giannotti Fry to rise and take the oath of office.
Marilyn, did you call Carrie's name as well?
I didn't because we didn't do a vote to approve her to join remotely.
Okay. It's okay, she's still approved.
I, Joya Giannotti Fry, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of Lyons Township High School District 204 in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and the laws of the State of Illinois to the best of my ability. I further swear that I shall respect taxpayer interests by serving as faithful protector of the school district's assets. I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members and others who seek a hearing before the board, while respecting the privacy of students and employees. I shall recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual, and that decisions can be made only by majority vote at the public board meeting. I shall abide by majority decisions of the board while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels. As part of the Board of Education, I shall accept the responsibility for my role in the equitable and quality education of every student in the school district. I shall foster with the board extensive participation of the community, formulate goals, define outcomes, and set the course for Lyons Township High School District 204. I shall assist in establishing a structure and an environment designed to ensure all students have the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework. I shall strive to ensure a continuous assessment of student achievement and all conditions affecting the education of our children in compliance with state law. I shall serve as education's key advocate on behalf of students in our community school to advance the vision for Lyons Township High School District 204, and I shall strive to work together with the district superintendent to lead the school district toward fulfilling the vision the board has created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills, knowledge, citizenship, and personal development. Welcome.
I'd just like to say thank you again for stepping up, and also to all of our applicants, because it's a selfless act to stand up and to serve the LT community this way. You were a standout with your commitment to the students and the overall LT community, so thank you so much. We appreciate it.
I'm honored. Thank you.
All right. Welcome. Thank you, Tim. There you go. Okay, and now we have two informational items. So first is the statement regarding the recent Attorney General opinion. The board acknowledges and respects the recent non-binding opinion from the Attorney General's office regarding closed session meetings held throughout 2022 and early 2023 related to the Willow Springs property. Audio from those meetings is being compiled and reviewed to meet the redaction needs related to setting the minimum bid price. Additionally, there are 3 board members, one who is just seated this evening, who were not on the board at the time and need an opportunity to get up to speed. With that, we plan to include this as an agenda item to our November 18th regular action meeting and potentially subsequent meetings if additional time is needed. It will be an opportunity for the board to discuss further and ask questions prior to making a formal decision about how to meet the Attorney General's requested course of action. And related to that is our continued future facilities funding discussion, the Willow Springs property. So at previous meetings over the past few months, the bid development and sale process has been discussed at length, as well as outcomes from our meeting with the Village of Willow Springs and the Pleasantdale Park District. The only update on that front tonight is that the meeting with the Pleasantdale School District 107 is scheduled for next Friday afternoon on November 15th. Tim, Brian, and I will attend with James Levy, our counsel, as we have been, and will report back at our meeting on November 18th. So with that, we'll now continue with an additional new business action item regarding a student disciplinary decision. We need a motion to uphold the October 9th, 2024 suspension for student 2025-001 and to approve the recommendation for expulsion of student 2025-001 as presented.
I move that the Board of Education, after consideration in closed session, uphold the October 9th, 2024 suspension for student 2025-001 and approve the recommendation for expulsion of student 2025-001 as presented.
I second the motion.
Marilyn, could you please call the roll?
Member Vita Daniels.
Yes.
Member Giannotti Fry.
Abstain.
Member Strewing.
Yes.
Member Thomas.
Yes.
Member Alvarez.
Yes.
Member Grutch.
Yes. Okay, thank you, everybody. We will now move into our committee reports. And within curriculum and instruction, the first item is strategic plan goal 1 update. Dr. Waterman.
Yeah, I'll be very brief in kind of kicking this off, but each, as we know, October, we presented a goal 3 of the strategic plan annual update. November is always time for the goal 1, which is our academic achievement. We also wrap into the November presentation because it's so timely with the release of the Illinois School Report Card, the release of the Illinois Equity Journey Continuum, and our school summative designation. We wrap it all into one. All those state reports, plus the standardized assessment report, plus the goal 1 strategic plan update. And I think what you'll hear tonight is a presentation led primarily by Scott and Christine, but also some interjections from Dr. Rowe, Dr. Owens, probably Dr. Tyrell, and myself as well throughout the presentation. So, like I said, I'll be brief and I'll kick this right to Scott and let him get started. Or Christine. Which one?
I will start.
Okay, there you go.
And unfortunately, we aren't going to be brief. But we're very excited. We do really appreciate the opportunity to come to the board and share things we're proud of, things we're encouraged by, and some other items that challenge us to strive to get better. So I sort of see this as our report card and really, what are the things that we've been doing, how have they made a difference, and what can we do to get even better. So Dr. Waterman's going to drive, and so if you want to look at the screens, everything is also in your packet. We're going to speak mostly from the slides. Certainly if you have any specific questions about the reports, we'll be happy to take a look at those as well. We're going to grab the things that we think are the best to share right now, but we can certainly answer any other questions that you have. Our outcomes, really for today, we want to share, as Dr. Waterman said, Goal 1 updates and future focus areas, review last year's standardized assessment data and advanced placement exam data, understand the metrics of the school report card, and we don't want to lose the headline here that we are an exemplary summative designation school for the first time. We want to kind of talk to you about how that happened, and then also view where we are on our equity journey continuum. So again, lots of good information, and hopefully things that you recall hearing about over the last couple of years, and through other reports that you're hearing about summer workshops and about textbooks and curriculum change and all that. So we'll begin with Goal 1. Goal 1 is student growth and achievement. So it fits that we're also looking at test scores, but it's not all of it, because our goal is not just test scores. It's to provide a comprehensive, innovative education for every student to ensure all students grow and achieve. So by doing that, we look in 3 particular areas: delivering a guaranteed, viable, and rigorous curriculum for all students, providing engaging and equitable instructional learning experiences for all students, aligned to the district's vision, and you'll see some examples of that throughout the presentation. And then also bringing consistencies to assessment and feedback processes that's supported by research and student staff voice. These together create the core, really, of the academics here at LT. The other goals, and you're going to hear this tonight, absolutely contribute. And so at different points, different folks will jump in and talk about what they're doing that led perhaps to some things. So I cannot take credit or blame for everything. All right. I want to start a little bit with curriculum review. I know we've been talking about curriculum review. I don't know if you've necessarily seen it. So what you're looking at is the first page of our unit map. So all of our units have in them alignment to 4 key areas: priority, skills, and standards, and that could be anything. It could be the NGSS, the science standards. It could be the Common Core. We've even aligned to state PE standards. Wherever the courses are that we have, there are standards that exist, and we're aligning those to each unit. We also have been developing skill-based rubrics, and so those rubrics are a part. Those rubrics are the ones that we use throughout. They're not just for like a one assignment. They're regular rubrics. They're things that give students clear feedback and often target those priority standards. What we've also done in partnership with Dr. Owens and our Goal 2 folks is we have aligned each of our units and each of our courses to the Illinois SEL standards. This is something that we have sort of set as a target at the beginning, and we weren't able to do that the first year. However, we are now at the point where this is being built into every unit. We have a crosswalk of the Illinois SEL standards that then aligns to specific activities and outcomes and strategies in classrooms. So this is a way to connect that as well. And lastly, the ELD standards. These are English learning metrics. So we want to make sure, especially in all of our core courses that are aligned with MLs, that we are including English learning standards as well. This has been a bit of a shift for some of our teachers who've never thought of this as being a core component of a unit map. But as we take them through this process, they see that anytime that you're giving students really good instruction on how to learn a language, it's going to help with your vocabulary in the classroom. It's going to help students who aren't MLs in addition to the students who are. these are at the core, they're at the top, and they're for the whole class. You then get into each unit. That unit then has a topic and a length with essential questions and supporting questions. The next slide gets into the core of the unit. So what are the things that must be taught? What are the things that you can teach? And by saying must teach and can teach, must teach are things that you're expecting every student to know and be able to do. There are times when you're differentiating, you might teach additional things, or you might give some students additional enrichment, but the must teach is what your assessments are built on. And you'll see there on the right side, those standards for the priority standards, the SEL standards, the English language proficiency standards are all linked there. And then we also include a little bit if in this unit there is Illinois required curriculum. In some of our courses, many of our social studies courses and our health classes, there's a lot of state mandated curriculum. And for others, when we get to this part, they're like, what does this mean? I teach auto shop. Like, well, you're right. There's no state mandated auto shop, so we're just going to leave that blank. But for those of you that aren't aware of how schools get audited, every time the regional office comes in, they want to see where are we teaching the Illinois required curriculum. We're able to give them the maps and they'll know exactly where it happens. So this has also been a good check as we've gone through the curriculum review to make sure not only we're covering the required curriculum that exists in the law, but even the new curriculum that's been added. So this has been a good exercise for all of us. You'll see there's also links to common assessments. These unit maps are not designed for students. These are designed for teachers. So we have the actual assessments linked into these, as well as the formative assessments. The next area is where we bring in literacy focus. This is often aligned to the Common Core standards in literacy, in particular those that are measured on the SAT, and as we move into the ACT. The ACT, again, that's also a part of Goal 1. We want to make sure that things are aligned with the assessments as well. What academic language, words and phrases, vocabulary is core in this unit, and what other priority vocabulary is there. And then lastly, we have the culturally responsive component. What Dr. Rowe did is she took Goldie Muhammad's 5 pursuits, which are really designed for students, and aligned them to the Illinois teaching and leading standards for culturally responsive pedagogy, which are teacher standards. And so when a teacher looks at what that state standard is saying for them, they can align it then specifically to one of Goldie Muhammad's pursuits. So this is where that happens. During the curriculum review, we spend one of our days working on this, and then in each unit they talk about where are we aligned with identity or intellect or criticality or joy in this particular unit. So this has been quite a bit of work, but what we're finding is we are better able to align. We're looking at some really clear assessments. That's sort of the next piece on the journey, is how do we ensure that our assessments are measuring all of this. But for the first time, we really have maps that are aligned to a whole lot more than just multiple choice and true false kind of questions, but really to bigger thinking and learning. So we're very excited about these maps, and have been spending a lot of time working on it, for sure.
On this slide, we have the key metrics that were selected by the Goal 1 team to track our progress toward Goal 1. Graduation rate reflects the percentage of students graduating within 4 years. AP dual credit participation shows the percentage of students enrolled in an AP or dual credit class. SAT performance measures the percentage of students achieving a score of 540 or higher in English language arts and mathematics, and GPA highlights the percentage of students earning a 2.8 on a 4.0 scale. All metrics are based on baseline data from the 2021-2022 school year, illustrating both the district's achievements and areas of ongoing growth. The Goal 1 team is committed to writing ambitious goals that align with our strategic plan to support ongoing improvement. You may notice that the SAT targets are labeled as pending. With the state transitioning to the ACT this year, we will use data collected during this school year to establish a new baseline. Once IASB releases their benchmarks, the Goal 1 team will set new targets accordingly. We anticipate that these benchmarks will be available in October of 2025. The next slide represents 3 additional Goal 1 metrics focused on equity and closing achievement gaps. The first two metrics address the achievement gap on the SAT between traditionally supported students and under-supported groups. The third metric examines the opportunity gap in AP and dual credit course enrollment for these same groups. Across all three metrics, LT is actively working to narrow these gaps. Reducing these gaps is essential to fostering an equitable learning environment where all students, regardless of background, have equal access to academic success. LT remains committed to supporting every student's growth, including through initiatives like our partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools that we'll talk about later in this presentation. Now that we've kind of finished up an overview of Goal 1 and what we've been working on, we're going to move into the standardized assessment report. So each spring, Illinois students participate in a range of state accountability exams. Reading and mathematics achievement have been assessed through the SAT suite of assessments, and this data is reflected in the Goal 1 scorecard we just reviewed. This was the final year that the SAT will be used for state accountability as ISB transitions to the ACT for spring of 2025. In addition to the SAT suite, all juniors took the Illinois Science Assessment, which measures science achievement. Students with severe cognitive disabilities participate in the Dynamic Learning Maps alternate assessment instead of the SAT suite and the Illinois Science Assessment. Students who qualify for English Learner Services take an English Language Proficiency Assessment called Access for ELLs. On the next slide, you'll see that participation in our assessments remains high, with over 99% of students testing in both ELA and mathematics. This high level of participation is essential because it ensures we have data on nearly every student's progress, helping to shape our interventions and support for those who need it most. The SAT suite of assessments includes the PSAT 8-9, PSAT 10, PSAT NMSQT, and the SAT. For state accountability, students took the PSAT 8-9 in the spring of their 9th grade year, the PSAT 10 in the spring of their 10th grade, and the SAT in the spring of 11th grade. Since the SAT was a graduation requirement in Illinois, any student who did not complete it during their junior year will take it during their senior year, and for this year's seniors, that will mean they're taking the ECT with writing. The SAT suite's vertical alignment allows educators to collect baseline data, monitor progress, and assess student readiness for post-secondary success. College Board considers students to be college and career ready when SAT section scores meet mathematics and evidence-based reading and writing benchmarks. College Board defines college and career ready as the following: a student with a 75% chance of earning at least a C in first semester credit-bearing college courses in algebra, statistics, pre-calculus or calculus for math, and history, literature, social sciences, or writing for evidence-based reading and writing. The chart on this slide shows the percentage of students meeting the College Board's college and career benchmarks in evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics from the spring of 2024. It presents all three SAT suite assessments side by side for comparison. The College Board uses a set of benchmarks to gauge a student's likelihood of achieving a C or higher in a college-level course. For accountability, however, the state of Illinois applies its own performance standards to measure student achievement on the spring SAT. These standards assess a student's mastery on the Illinois Learning Standards, categorizing performance into 4 levels: partially met, approached, met, or exceeded content standards in English language arts and mathematics. While both the College Board benchmarks and the Illinois performance levels draw on the same SAT data, they offer different perspectives on proficiency and each have different cut scores. The chart on this slide shows the percentage of students in each of the 4 Illinois performance levels for evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics. In evidence-based reading and writing, 32% of students scored in the approaching category, while 23% achieved an approaching score in mathematics. These students are very close to demonstrating mastery of the Illinois Learning Standards as measured by the SAT. LT remains committed to providing all students with a rigorous, challenging curriculum aligned to these standards. The chart on the next slide illustrates the Illinois performance levels, with each bar showing the percent of students reaching proficiency levels 3 and 4 on the reading and writing section of the spring SAT over the past 5 years. The bars on the left reflect LT student performance, while the second set represents performance at the state level. both LT and the state experienced a slight decline in the percentage of students achieving levels 3 or 4 this year, with LT continuing to outperform the state. It's important to recognize that while we track these percentages annually, each year reflects a different cohort of students, each with unique strengths and areas for growth. The next chart displays the Illinois performance levels, where each bar represents the percentage of students achieving proficiency, again that's a level 3 or 4, in the mathematics section of the spring SAT over the last 5 years. The leftmost bars represent student performance at LT, while the subsequent bars show performance at the state level. This year, both LT and the state saw a minor decrease in the percentage of students attaining levels 3 and 4, yet LT still outperformed the overall state average. It's worth noting again that each year's data reflects a distinct group of students, each with their own strengths and opportunities for development. It's also important to note that these slight declines in both reading and math align with national findings from NWEA MAP, a leader in assessment research. They recently published findings that revealed that the gap between pre-COVID and COVID test scores widened in 2023-2024 across nearly all grades, with a larger gap increase in reading than mathematics. It's also essential to acknowledge that mastery of content and proficiency rates differ amongst student groups. This chart illustrates the percentage of students who achieve proficiency on the spring SAT by student group. The light blue bar represents English Language Arts proficiency in the spring of 2022. The medium blue colored bar is spring of 2023, and the darkest bar is spring of 2024. LT experienced slight declines in student proficiency across most groups when comparing the spring 2023 assessment to the spring 2024 assessment. For groups with most significant declines, the smaller population of those groups means that one student's performance can significantly impact the overall percentage. The next chart displays the percentage of students achieving proficiency on the spring SAT by student group for mathematics. Again, the light blue bar is spring of 2022, the medium blue colored bar is spring of 2023, and the darkest bar is the spring of 2024. Most student groups have demonstrated slight variation in SAT mathematics performance from year to year. Notably, the Asian student group experienced growth, while the white student group's performance has remained steady. For groups with more significant yearly fluctuations, the smaller population size means that individual performance has a larger impact on overall percentage. LT recognizes that there are gaps between student groups, and these disparities are consistent with national trends. We are dedicated to providing a high-quality education to all students, and our district's equity leadership team is actively exploring additional strategies to better support students from traditionally undersupported groups. One thing that we have been working really hard on is our SAT prep class offerings, and I'd like to highlight the positives that we've seen from that class. So in our second year of the free lunch prep class for the SAT, we saw 177 students who attended at least one of the 16 sessions, and of those students who participated, they saw an 104-point average score increase and a median score change of 110 points. This growth is greater than the College Board expected growth, so these prep classes are providing real measurable benefits that can extend beyond high school. This year we will transition that prep class to support the ACT with writing assessment, since that is the assessment that all juniors will be taking in April. And we just wanted to thank our entire school community for supporting this class and providing this opportunity to all students, especially those who might not be able to attend an after-school prep class. Now we're going to move on to the Illinois Science Assessment. This is the state science assessment for students in grade 11. The ISA is a general science assessment that covers life science, physical science, earth and space science, and engineering and technology practices are embedded throughout. This was the last year that we will be administering the Illinois Science Assessment, as ISB has adopted the science section of this ACT with writing as the state's high school science assessment moving forward. So the chart on this slide represents the percentage of students who achieved proficiency on the spring Illinois Science Assessment over the last 3 years. The first set of bars indicates the overall science proficiency level for all students at Lyons Township High School, and then the following bars represent the proficiency percentages for various student groups at LT. Although overall performance on the Illinois Science Assessment showed a slight decline, it remains strong for most student groups. Again, in groups that have significant variation, the smaller population size of that group means that an individual student performance can have a notable impact on that overall percentage. Just like in previous years, students with significant cognitive disabilities have taken the Dynamic Learning Maps alternate assessment in place of the SAT and the Illinois Science Assessment. Students in grades 9, 10, and 11 are assessed in English, Language Arts, and Mathematics, while 11th graders also take the science portion. At LT, less than 1% of our students qualify to participate in the DLM. And just like in past years, state regulations prevent the reporting of assessment data for student groups with fewer than 10 individuals to protect their privacy. So while we cannot publicly disclose the DLM data, I think it's important to recognize that we do have some students who complete this assessment and acknowledge that our staff continue to use the data to guide instruction, inform program placement, and then address the academic needs of all of our students. Access for English language learners is an English language proficiency exam administered to all English learners. This assessment assesses listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Students receive a score in each domain as well as an overall composite score. Access for ELLs has 6 proficiency levels. The chart on this slide illustrates the percentage of multilingual learners at LT who achieved levels 5 and 6 over the last 6 years. The second set of bars presents the same data at the state level. LT performs comparably to the state of Illinois and continues to enhance the supports available for students learning the English language. The population of students taking the Access test is constantly evolving as students who achieve the exit score of a 4.8 no longer participate in the assessment the following year. The multilingual department uses these Access scores to inform instruction and support all multilingual learners. As mentioned earlier, students receive domain scores in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Our multilingual teachers analyze those domains to deliver individualized instruction tailored to each student in the program. As I mentioned previously, once a student scores a 4.8 composite score on Access, they exit the English Learner program. In the spring of 2024, 8% of LT students who completed the Access assessment earned a score of 4.8 or higher. The percentage of students exiting has increased over the last 4 years due to the collective efforts of our entire school community. LT students, staff, and community members have numerous reasons to take pride in their achievements. This slide highlights a few noteworthy celebrations based on the standardized assessment data shared this evening. 73% of students in the class of 2025 met college and career readiness benchmarks in ELA. 56% of students in the class of 2025 met college and career readiness benchmarks in math. The percentage of students proficient on Access for ELLs increased by 1, while the percentage of students exiting the ML program rose by 2%. 72% of juniors demonstrated proficiency on the Illinois Science Assessment. Although LT continues to outperform the state of Illinois, there are still achievement gaps evident in our standardized assessment data, and as a school community, we must persist in our efforts to close these gaps. Our District Equity Leadership Team, or DELT, is dedicating this year to researching actionable steps that our school community can take to enhance the achievement for all students and reduce these disparities, with the hope of implementing the strategies and ideas over the next few years.
I'll pause there for questions on standardized assessment, SAT suite, WIDA, etc.
A lot of data.
Yes.
It is.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
So I just trying in my head to make, so we've instituted the COTOP model, but like when would you expect to see some of that reflected in these scores? Do we need another year or two to have, like, to see how, if that's working, how that's going?
Definitely. And we started with freshmen, so they will, this would have been.
This will be the first year.
This will be the first year they take
That's, so we're like a year
standardized
till, okay, so
Yeah.
like, we haven't seen that
assessments. Correct.
bump yet, okay. That's what I
And it will
thought.
be hard to tell because we're switching the test.
Right, okay, well, that's two.
Because we've
Okay.
been preparing them for the SAT for 3 years, and now
That's
will
awesome.
be the
Okay.
ACT.
Okay, so just trying to get my mind around that.
Yep.
The other thing is, this is just for me, like when we're looking at slide 65 in our packet, which would be like, let's just say like the ISA proficiency overall by student group, when we classify that by student group, is there a way then that you can, because when you're talking about the smaller subgroups under there, you have a much greater variance, if like, you know, you have one student or something like that, that's an outlier. Is there a way underneath that that you can put the percentage of the student population so that we can look at what we're looking at?
We can definitely get you that information and include that for future years. I mean, we can get it free for
Because it would be
this year
something
and
really
for future
helpful to
years.
you, if you're looking
Right.
at, like, for example, like the African-American, subset that you're looking at.
It
I
would
mean,
be
that's probably
helpful.
3 or 4% of the population
Correct.
versus where you're looking at 2 or more races or white, which might be 70% of the population.
Yeah,
Something
that's a
like
good
that. I
point.
think that would be a really good metric when we're looking at this, because then it wouldn't be, because I looked at it and was clearly alarmed by looking at such a big dramatic decrease, that you explaining that it was a smaller subgroup might be really a key thing to note on here.
Correct. One student, if this, student group size is 30, is a lot larger percentage than one student in a student group that might be 200.
Right. So, right, when you have, so then when you have that, like, looking at such a decline, specifically within regards to the African-American student population, because that seemed to be consistent amongst all of them, are you then looking at that one student? Obviously, that wouldn't be for our purposes, but for that, like for the board to look at that, but are you then looking at one student to see, does that student need attention? Like, what's going on to say, like, okay, this was a really big decrease. Do we need to give more attention to this one student, or is there something going on? That should be, to me, alarming.
We tend to look more holistically and at more actionable data rather than the SAT test, just because we don't get those scores until they're in a whole different set of courses in a whole another school year. So this test is given in April, and when we find out how students did, it's not until August or September. But that being said, we do quite a bit along the way, so we're monitoring student grades, we're monitoring student performance through our SST teams. We're looking at behavior and other interventions. So when we get to the report card, I think you'll see a better picture perhaps of how we're addressing the needs of all students.
But I'm not saying all students, I'm saying like one subgroup here.
Any kid.
Okay.
I mean, so our SST teams really focus on the students who are struggling. And so if we have students who are in a particular subgroup, they will be a part of those conversations. What we mentioned a little bit of, and we're still really at the beginning stages of, is using our equity and leadership team to really dive deeper into data and come up with some new ideas to try some different things. So to your point, looking at the data of our subgroup populations and thinking, what can we do differently for our Latinx students, for African American students?
Well, and I think even like when you're looking at what can you do for that population, but even when you break it down further within that population, if you have 2 students, like, I don't know, let's just say you have 30 students and 2 of those have really declined, that brought the whole thing down. I mean, are you able to find, one, I'm sure you are able to, but are you then defining and looking at those 2, maybe it's 2 students that would be an outlier?
So after the PSAT and MSQT every year, I pull a list of students who fall in that approaching category.
Okay.
And they are personally invited by their teachers to that drop-in prep class. So like that's just one example of how we're using the data to identify students who need additional support and trying to proactively get them that support before they take the SAT.
So then that circles back to, then if you have like, is that teacher then the one that's been identified that, to be, is it the right teacher then that's asking them to come? Because maybe they're not connected to the math teacher and having that, but then they have like, I'm never going to get the acronym right. I can never remember all the acronyms, but, where we have.
SSD.
Right, like, right, so that you would have that, person that they have a connection with or something like that, to be the one to say, hey, I think it'd be really great that you came to this. I'll see you there. Do I mean something like that? Because maybe they have no connection in that, sense of belonging with the math teacher, but then if their English teacher says, that they've really bonded with and connected with, hey, I'd love to see you do like drop in or do this, that might be more.
Yeah, I know last year we asked for both the math and the English teacher to invite, so it was both of them. And then I know that the assistant principal for the junior class last year also looked at the list and connected with some students on there. So we did have a couple people, but it's always great to get more touches.
Right, and like because I guess that's my concern is you have like 2 or 3 students that might be the way outlier. What are we doing for those 2 or 3 students to go, to get them there? Because it is quite a dramatic decrease when you're looking at if you look at the math proficiency, when you go from 26 to 9, you know what I mean? That is huge, where you had like a big drop off.
If students are having trouble academically, behaviorally, social, emotionally, though, we would not be using SAT data on a weekly basis to be monitoring those students and to inform intervention. So I say that to bring comfort that we're not waiting to get this score report, say, oh my gosh, let's dig in and see which student declined, or if a student declined. We'd be looking at, most likely if a student is struggling greatly on this summative standardized assessment, there's probably other struggles that are coming up, and we run weekly reports on all of our students. So we'd be capturing academic concerns, behavioral concerns, attendance concerns well before any test.
Which is great to hear, but then are you going back and checking then when you're getting this data here to say, oh my gosh, we went from 26 to 9 in the math
Keep in mind,
proficiency?
we didn't go from 20, we had one
Right.
graduating class that had 26% proficient, and then the next class had 9%
Two different groups of students.
proficient. So it's not this isn't.
Okay, well that, okay.
This
helps
isn't
me to,
a
like-
chart of a
Okay.
student.
It's not
cohort data.
Okay,
Correct.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Different groups.
But what
That's
it
why I'm
was-
struggling with,
but
like,
it
if it's the
was-
same.
This is what we've all been talking about nationwide. Is this a product of the pandemic? Is this a product of our curriculum? Is this a product of our supports? So even if there are not that many students, only 9% were proficient. So what are we doing differently for math in general and for our African-American students in math specifically? And that's the thing we're really trying to tackle.
Got it.
Yeah, so that being said, yeah, there are going to be a couple of kids who don't do well on the particular test. I wish every kid took the test as seriously as some, and not all do, but that's consistent as well. I think, again, what this data gives us is a snapshot, and it's something that we then sort of use to gauge other programs and other supports. Our frustration is we're now going to a new test. And this was a different test than the year before that, so this was an online test as opposed to a
So it's
paper
really
test.
hard to have. Well, then I think that's
It's hard to draw a lot of conclusions, but I agree with you, Jill, is when you see comparative data that's like that and it's very consistent for your white students or for other students, and it's not in this particular subgroup, that's an area that we're focusing on through more
Okay. I mean, it is
systemic-
alarming, like when I look at it.
Yeah, and we
mean,
want to make a systemic change to that, because I think that's not just a kid had a bad day.
Right.
That's a
I
systemic.
mean, it's like, it's within everything, it just
Correct.
stands
Yeah.
out.
And I will say, I think that's the important part too, also supporting us having a new division chair with mathematics, and I think allowing us to have the supports that we need to really hone in on developing our math program that's going to help us be successful for all of our students. So I'm really appreciative, I know our whole team is, for allowing us to expand our leadership team in that area, so.
Okay, but thank you for that. I mean, I think it really, like, also that it's not the same, like, thanks for pointing that it's not the same group. Because you're like, what is going on?
It's a lot of data, and it's hard to keep it straight.
But it would be really helpful, because I had that in my notes too, to know like what's the percentage across all of the subgroups, because the one that was listed in all of the documentation is we're at 6% English learner students, and it's growing. I mean, it was 4% 2 years ago, so I think all of this, is acknowledging our shifting student population in general, and so I do applaud this team for getting on top of that and ahead of it. We were just talking about co-teaching, and that's still early stages, but, that was in the anticipation of all of this. And, making greater strides for bilingual teachers and all of that. And I'll be excited to hear how the leadership team is going to dig in, like you had mentioned, Scott. But I am fascinated by just the shifting population in general.
Yeah, we have well over 200 multilingual students, and just right before the pandemic, we were right around 60 or 70. So it's been a pretty major shift.
That's huge. That's a lot.
But also, too, I think, it does go back to systemic, because I think, I mentioned this before, where I believe you mentioned maybe a year ago that if you haven't taken, is it college or intermediate algebra?
Sure, Algebra 2, right?
Yeah, Algebra 2 before junior year, then you're not set up for success with this test.
Correct.
And so looking at that as it relates to even the demographic subgroups, how many of those students have not taken the intermediate algebra before junior year?
Yeah, so that's something we've been looking at.
I'm not asking you for the
No, I know.
answer.
I don't
I'm
know
just
the number
saying.
off the top of my head either, but that's something that we've been talking to our associate schools about, because if you recall, we were talking about allowing students to take honors geometry in their home school, and to a superintendent, they said, yeah, we don't really want to talk about that. We want to talk about where kids need to be in algebra so they're ready for high school. And so we've had some really good conversations about that. We've been sharing our data with them on their students and their student performance when they come here, which is the first time we've really been doing some of that sharing, and having those conversations of, ideally every student would finish algebra before they come to high school, but they don't. But for the kid who is still just starting Algebra 1 as a freshman, they have the greatest obstacle to overcome. And that's one of the things I believe Dr. Rowe was mentioning. Our math chair, Dr. Pruka, has really been working with that Algebra 1 team to change how we're actually even teaching algebra, so that we get more students to master the core content of algebra, so that they can proceed along and be in a better position to take that test junior year, but also to perform better in math. That's the key. We have a little more comparative data later. I think it's a little dangerous sometimes when you compare it to other schools and say, hey, we're doing better than others. We still have a problem, right? And this is an area that we want to focus on. So that's why our equity leadership team is really focusing on those kids who have the greatest gaps.
Go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
No, please.
I just had a follow-up to that in preparation, and it looks like the prep classes have been effective. You're seeing some positive results. I'm curious to learn a little bit more. Are those held, did you say after school only?
So we have some after-school and evening classes that students can sign up for. There is a very small fee associated with that. I'm saying small because if you were to go and get private test prep, it would be triple the cost easily of what we charge. And so those run starting in January, pretty much leading up until spring testing. We found that a lot of our students who would benefit the most from a prep class had barriers that did not allow them to come after school or in the evenings. So we started a free lunch time prep class that meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 25 minutes opposite the student's lunch. That allows them to get some prep time in during the day. We do not charge for it. We invite students who are in that approaching category, as well as all of our students who are on free and reduced lunch. So those students are personally invited by their math and their English teacher last year. their parents got emails, and so that's kind of how that works.
So the 177 students reflected on this slide took the lunch class, not the
Correct.
after-school class.
Yes, we had over 240 students in our after-school and evening classes.
And probably comes as no surprise, the kids who came to more of the sessions showed greater gains. So,
Right.
you know, we entice them with food and candy.
It should work, yeah.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm just thinking about some of the things that you guys have been doing, and your curricular maps, like, in my mind, that's the foundation of where we start to try and make sure that we're providing a rigorous instruction. And I was just really impressed by them. I'm starting there, and then there's no but after that, but I said it. I didn't really mean it. And thank you. Really more, I'm wondering, how long have those curricular maps been so in-depth as they are, connected to SEL standards, connected to all the work that we're doing in
That's a very good question. So we are in the third year of our curriculum review, and we've been doing it similar to how we started with the co-teaching and other things. So we started with freshman core curriculum, sophomores last year, we're doing juniors this year. There's been a few things that have gone out of order, and this year we're actually focusing on a lot of our elective pathways as well. But what it is it is a slow process, but that's also because our teachers teach all four years, all four levels, and we're trying not to have subs as much as we do. So every team will have a half day 4 times a year, and then during their PLC teams, they're working on different components of those maps. So we'll introduce these standards alignment. They have previous maps, but we're taking them through the standards again, making sure there aren't too many. If you have 18 standards you want everyone to master, they're not going to. So, really focusing on that and what's the importance of a power standard and how you do that. And then really aligning it to the specific curriculum itself. We've had deep conversations about what do we take out, what do we put in. You'll also recall in the spring, I've been bringing textbook requests, which is normally not when we do it. That's because those teams have spent that year and now they need to make a change. So right now we have biology teams looking at making a change, even though their curriculum review was 2 years ago. They're now saying, you know what, I think we want to focus here. So they want to pilot some things. Chemistry is doing the same. Math-wise, they're looking for additional supports, in particular in Algebra 1. In fact, Algebra 1 wanted to kind of roll back and meet again. So they're sort of returning, again, with Dr. Pruka as their newish leader, her second year. But she had some really good turnaround work that she did in her previous district, and she felt like she needed to meet with them. So she's sort of cycling back too. So it is a slow process. And then like any curriculum review, once you've added new curriculum, changed curriculum, brought new curriculum in, you've got to try it. So this is a 3 to 5 year process for every team before they sort of go through it again. But that being said, teachers are having those conversations. They're looking for the strategies that bring SEL into the classroom. They're looking for strategies that are focusing on cultural responsive pedagogy. And those conversations then lead to what we're doing in our professional learning as well. So in bringing in Michael McDowell, he's really focusing on helping our teachers and students build good habits, sort of bring in metacognitive strategies so that they're doing the things in the classroom that will lead to better performance. It's not just we're going to make new tests or we're going to give you a new lecture. It's how are we going to then engage students? Because we're seeing that in Panorama too. So, when I said earlier, there's a lot of moving parts to this. The Panorama that's in part of Goal 2 or Goal 3 is what we need as well for Goal 1. So it's not just the curriculum, it's also how are kids feeling when they're here? Are they connected to the classroom? Are they connected to the content, to the teacher, to their classmates? So it's been exciting to have all these conversations happening. It's also a bit challenging to sort of point it all in the same direction, but at least the strategic plan is helping us do that.
And I think along the same line, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, is we have kids whose motivation sometimes is not to do well on the SAT or the ACT. They're looking at graduating and going in the workforce or the trades or the militaries, and they don't see the value in that. However, there is value, right? So statistics will show if you do well on the SAT, you're going to do better on the ASVAB or the some of your we've had, at least in our district, some of the union workers that will talk about kids having to take those tests and how they need to be proficient in algebra and all these other things. Is there any talk or work around the motivating of kids, despite their career paths or post-secondary plans or roles, to do well on these tests? Or do we feel like those kids that just are not doing well are just not trying because they don't see the connection between the two?
It's hard to get into the mind of a teenager on a test day.
It's scary too sometimes, right?
We were interested, and a little trepidatious, but interested in how the test would be on a computer. Because again, prior to coming to high school, our kids have only done computer-based tests, MAP, the Illinois assessment, the IAR, all that stuff at the elementary and middle schools is online. And they come here and they started paper tests. So we were interested to see what that shift would be. Does it change a student's motivation or not? And I don't have an answer. I mean, it looks like the students statewide did a little bit less well on the online test. We also had a lot of questions about the online test, and because everyone took the same first part of the test, and then depending how you did, you either got more challenging questions or you got less challenging questions. We were trying to figure out if you didn't get to the more challenging questions, what was your ceiling? All those things we're not asking questions about anymore because we're not using that test again. So we're kind of frustrated that we're in the third year a row of third different tests, and a lot of those hunches and things we want to follow up on, we're like, well, we'll try ACT now. We'll see what that looks like. That being said, we've done ACT before. It hasn't changed a lot, and so we're Christine and I went and got our certification over the summer. Actually, at your district, you can figure out what's going on with the ACT now and how it will look online. But we don't want to put all of our stock, though, in a standardized test. We hope the standardized test will follow all the things that we're doing that are more in the classroom and day-to-day and assessment, local assessment related. But it's a challenge. I mean, kids don't love taking standardized tests. Well, some kids do, but we're not worried about them. And it is a challenge. The one thing I do like of how we do it here at LT is it's important. We value it. For the juniors, the seniors aren't here. The juniors they take the test and they go home. It's not a bells ringing and kids switching classes. We have that luxury with the two-campus system. And we set that up by having the 9th graders and 10th graders follow that same format. So that when the 9th graders are taking what will now be the pre-ACT, the 10th graders aren't in the building. And same for when the 10th graders. So we like to build that culture of this is important from us. And our teachers value it. Our teachers talk about it. They're doing bell ringers. They're having kids practice the problems, doing it in the same manner that they'll see on the test when they get to it. So I know Christine's worked very hard on getting our teachers those bell ringers and those opportunities to just try this type of a question, right?
Yeah. And do you think part of those bell ringers and those conversations, either in the classroom or with counselors at group guidance, are they making connections between this isn't just an assessment that you have to do and get over with, but it may actually help you with scholarship money or doing better on, whatever it may be, whatever their path is? Are they having conversations about, even if you're not a traditional post-secondary college student, you're going somewhere else, that this still has value for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the things we were all worried about too is when colleges sort of made these standardized tests optional, that a lot of kids would not take them as seriously. But we think they do. We think they are. I mean, when it's always interesting in Test Central on the day of a big test because you have kids who come in a little late or their laptop's not working. They're genuinely anxious about that. It's not like they're coming in late going, whatever, give me a laptop, I'll give it. They're just like, I'm not in the right place. I needed this. I was late. My computer's not working. There's an energy to it, and there's a an urgency to it, so.
And we generally have very good attendance on test day.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, your statistics were really good.
Yeah.
which is-
We also aren't testing in a giant gym. We're testing in classrooms, so there's, 24 per room, roughly?
Roughly.
So again, it's more like a classroom setting. It's not, here's 400 kids in a gym taking a test, right? So there's more eyes on them, there's more,
Sorry, my last question.
Yeah.
For now, I promise. The move to the ACT, though, there was, in their PR push, was it's going to measure more accurately, appropriately across the entire nation, that people that were taking the SAT, and I don't remember the specifics, so I'm hoping you can help. If you've heard that, remind me what that was about, that this is supposed to better align with the, I feel like it was like a sales job maybe by the state, but I don't know that. Wasn't there some talk about this will better align with national standards or?
I think the messaging was that in doing this switch, a committee is able to get together to review the Illinois learning standards and redefine what it means to be proficient. And so I don't think it's so much like that the test better aligns. I think that it's we're going to redefine what proficient is to better align with the rest of the country. Illinois has the highest benchmark.
Yeah.
One of the highest benchmarks for what it means to be proficient. You know, College Board had their college and career readiness benchmarks, and Illinois made their benchmarks higher. When you look at NWA MAP linking studies and compare Illinois to other states, NWA MAP found that Illinois is the highest. You have to do the highest on NWA MAP to be considered proficient. And so Illinois has committees together looking at the math, the reading, and the science standards to really define what does it mean to be proficient with our learning standards. Once they've defined what proficient means, they're going to work to define cut scores based on that definition of proficient. And so I think the goal is to get our cut scores in a little bit more alignment with the rest of the nation.
And you're right, that was the big selling point, because we had less students meeting that benchmark. So
Right.
then, when looking at comparison data from state to state, Illinois came out looking worse than other states.
Brian,
And so
are you-
trying to align that a
are
little.
you on our presentation or on the board packet?
I'm on our presentation.
All right, could you go to slides 12 and 13?
Let's see.
So if you look at slide 12 is the SAT benchmark, and you'll see that 73% of our students met it for reading and writing, and 56 did for math. And then the next slide are the state cut scores. So the state has decided that only 53% of our students in English and 53 in math met it. So that's the difference. So SAT says you're ready if you hit this benchmark, and Illinois says not really. Yeah.
I just don't know what you mean by cut score. It might only be me, I'm sorry.
So it just means they decide whatever this benchmark is, the two boxes, the two top boxes, the students who land in that category, whatever they decide that number is, those are the kids who meet and exceed standards, and the one below
Got
it don't, right? So that's literally the cut. You either made the cut or you didn't.
That's what you mean, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just,
So if you then go to the previous slide, they're saying that 73% of the kids made the cut. And the slide after it said only 50. So nearly 20% of our kids.
Because this is an SAT slide, and this is a state of Illinois slide.
Exactly. And that's been our big bone of contention with the AC, how the state's been using the SAT, and what Christine says we're one of the hardest to meet standards in the nation.
Right. So SAT looks at the likelihood of getting a C or higher on a college entry-level class, whereas Illinois has come up with their own definition of what it means to be proficient, and they picked a higher score.
okay, got it. I just didn't know what you meant by the cut score.
Yeah, no, it's good.
And I think this is all really important, but I think to what Jill said earlier, the discrepancies that we're finding in our testing scores, I know that's something that we're all concerned about, and I don't want that to take away from that conversation, because I agree, I think that's a big, it's a big concern that I know you guys are working hard on, but it's definitely something that we don't ever want to lose focus of. And I like seeing how it's embedded in, going back to my original question about the curricular maps, that we're embedding a lot of this into multiple facets of the work that you're doing, so.
And keep in mind too, this is Goal 1 report, but Goal 2 is working on all those supports, right? So what are the supports that we have in place? You can also think about it if you're in MTSS speak, and I'm sorry for the acronyms, but you know, that's what we do. This is the Tier 1 report, and Tier 2 and 3, those are the supports that kids need that aren't necessarily in every class, right? So that's the extra supports. We've got teams going out to look at other schools. What are we doing for lunch study halls or for other, you know, do we look at our change in our school day? All those things we've been talking about, it's all part and parcel to this. So we're kind of focusing on sort of end data, but we're also really looking earlier on. You'll see that when we get to the report card too. Dr. Terrell has some really exciting stuff to share.
Thank you.
So I just have one question, if you don't mind, like, playing off of the same topic, right? And I don't know that you can even answer directly, but maybe indirectly. Because our numbers on the report card have increased steadily from, just at quick glance at the snapshot from, say, 2018, I think is as far back as it goes, to now in terms of our English learners, right? As that's been increasing, is it possible, I hate the word assume, but is it possible to assume that that is also contributing to some of the decrease in that particular subgroup? And I ask the question because I've spoken to so many students who, if they are undocumented, right, and that's where the sketchiness of my question comes in, they know that not having a social security number means they're not applying to a college. They know that. And so their value that they place in these tests is so completely different from the students who do place value. Is that something that is contributing to that subgroup, that particular subgroup's drop?
I don't know if that is so much. We don't have that large of a percentage of undocumented students.
Okay.
I think one of the things that's a challenge, though, is if you have students whose first language is not English and you're taking a test in English,
right?
There are very few supports that you have.
That
You're
was the
allowed to
second
have a
part of my
dictionary,
question.
right?
Right.
You're allowed to have a dictionary. But like, for example, as we move to the ACT, you're only allowed to spend, if you're going to answer all the questions, 30 seconds,
You only have
a
so
minute
much
and a half.
time.
If you really look up every word, you're never
You're
going to
gonna
make
run out of time.
it, right?
Right.
So even when at the strategy sessions for taking the ACT, they're saying, don't read the fourth passage in reading. It's too hard for you. Do really good in the first three. That to me is not a test that I want measuring whether we're doing a good job as a school, but it's a good way of measuring how well a kid can take an ACT, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a balance. There's absolutely a balance. That's why we need to have our own data. We need to have our own courses. You know, looking at, as you'll see with not only AP but also dual credit, are kids taking challenging courses? Are they getting college ready by the courses they take? Perhaps more so even than the standardized assessment they take, especially since many colleges now are saying, you know, we don't want that standardized assessment because of those biases.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you have to remember with a multilingual group of students, that group is always changing. As students increase their proficiency and score that 4-point out, they exit and they're no longer considered a multilingual student. So as we get students to reach proficiency, they're leaving that group and then they're no longer counted the next year. So that group, not only is it a different class every year, but the students who qualify change every year. So it's always evolving.
We've even been starting to look at students who are identified as former ML. So students who were in a multilingual program, even in first, second, third grade, how are they doing? And is there a correlation or a focus there too?
Okay. And I always think it's important that, you know, because we don't want to start getting into our real deficit, you know, view of things, you know, when we're kind of looking at looking at individual students, we really want to not worry about fixing kids, but really fixing our systems.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that we're stepping back to that, and that's really what our work has been. Like, when we see this, what is the implication for us and the work that we have to do for our system to serve our kiddos versus like drilling down as if, because we don't want to blame or like focus on kids as deficit.
Oh, for sure. And I want to make sure that I wasn't asking the question in a sense of blaming, more as a sense of, like you said, like, how do we make sure that we're supporting that? If the numbers are going up, how do we as a school make sure that that's being supported as a whole?
Just
Yeah.
overall,
Just
just
to
even when we're
clarify,
talking
yeah,
about
I appreciate that.
motivation, and not just you, just like when we're speaking about, kids taking it seriously or motivated. So then
Yeah.
we're kind of drilling in there, so we don't want to get that deficit way. We want to kind of push back out and think of our system. So I just wanted to give that feedback.
Appreciate that.
So is that 4.8 the same score that's needed to like score on the access test? Like to place out of taking the access test gets you out of ELA? Is that correct?
Yeah, you have to pass the access test at a 4.8 or higher.
Okay, so it's the 4.8.
Mhm.
That's the same thing.
Yep.
The thought we were having, like there was like a plateau and not as many exiting out.
Our exit rate
So
has
it's
increased.
It's increasing.
Yeah, that's
2, 5,
slide
6, 8.
24.
There it is.
Yeah,
Blow that up here.
we went from an exit rate of 2 to 5 to 6 to 8. And
Is
it's
that
also
like a
important to keep in
percentage
mind
or is
that
that wrong?
we have had
That's a
greater
percentage.
exit despite having greater numbers of students who are needing the ML services. So that's also growing, so, because this is a percentage, it's not a number of kids.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a percentage then of long-term language learners?
Our long-term EL, I'll have to look.
I think that's a really telling, to me.
It is.
That's a
I
really
agree.
telling percent, like, because you might have somebody that's moving in, that's just, you had to qualify them. So I would like to see that percentage when we're looking at how many are exiting, how many are long-term learners.
I believe most.
I wanted to say 70% is the number sticking in my head of our total EL population is a long-term EL, which is over 6 years.
And how does that compare to the state then?
I'm
Not to put you on the spot here, I
No,
don't-
and I can get that. I'll
I'm
get
sorry
that
about
information.
that.
I want to make sure we get you the accurate information.
Okay, Brian said he made a note, okay.
But I think the takeaway is that even within our multilingual learners, there's such huge diversity among those learners. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. We approach it this way. Certainly, we reference the standards and we use those standards, but for someone who's a newcomer versus a long-term EL, there's very different ways that we would want to be
But I just think
engaging, working with
we need
them.
to look at the whole picture. That would be, to me, part of the picture.
The state report card said that last school year, 129 of our EL students were more than 7 years as an EL student. I think we had about 196, or close to 200.
That's probably about 70, right? Good remembering.
Some stuff sticks up.
Want to jump into AP?
Yes. All right, so our next section looks at participation in advanced placement or AP exams, as well as the passing statistics amongst students who sat for the AP assessments. So the number of students who took at least one AP test reached a new high during the spring of 2024. Not only are more students taking at least one AP exam, but 88% of the students who completed at least one AP exam received a score high enough for credit at any public in-state university. LT saw an increase in the number of exams administered last year. So within the 2,719 exams administered, 12% were administered to Hispanic Latinx students, reflecting an increase compared to the previous year. Asian students accounted for 4% of all exams. Black African American students represented 1%. White students completed 77% of the exams, and 3% were administered to students identifying as 2 or more races. While there has been growth in the percentage of Hispanic Latinx students taking AP exams, these figures still do not fully represent the diversity of our school community. And we are continuing to collaborate with equal opportunity schools to ensure that these percentages more accurately reflect our student demographics. This next chart looks at the percentage of exams that earned a passing score, which is a 3 or higher, on each AP exam administered. So out of those 2,719 exams, 86% of all exams resulted in a score of 3 or higher. This data is also broken out by student group and is illustrated by the blue bars in this chart. Each group demonstrated strong performance with high passing rates, and these rates represent improvements compared to the previous year's data. So just some observations about our AP exams. LT has been committed to increasing participation from undersupported groups in AP courses through our work with equal opportunity schools. And not only are more students being challenged with the AP coursework, but they are being successful as the percentage of passing scores remains high, with 86% of tests earning a 3 or higher.
I'm sorry. Like, am I missing the chart with, because you have, under passing exams, you break down the different groups, but is there a slide that I'm missing? When you look at the number of exams administered, then we have a slide for how many for each population are administered that, because I think that's a key number too.
That is not a slide we have here. I did speak to it, and it's in the report. So 12%, I can repeat it, 12% were administered to Hispanic Latinx students. So 12% of
So
that.
12% of the Latinx students took the exam?
No. So of the 2,719 exams, 12% of those were administered to.
I guess, but my question would be like, for the groups, I just like, how many of that each population took the exam? Like if you're looking at like.
So we'll get to that a little bit in our EOS data.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
That slide kind of shows it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I like it.
I think it's also in your packet. I'll probably find it. Page.
No, I think she wants to know, like, of our Hispanic students, 5% of all Hispanic students took an AP dual credit class, and that's not in the.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Because I think, like, because we've talked about that through so many meetings that we've had, as to having that number grow amongst the different groups. I think that's two different numbers, how many pass, but how many actually take it.
Yeah, that, we are getting to something similar.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay, I'll wait. Okay, thank you. Sorry to keep holding us up.
No, that's fine, because again, there's a lot of.
so much to pick out.
A lot of numbers, and
Okay.
just try to figure out how to present it in a way that it makes sense. So, just briefly, a reminder, Equal Opportunity Schools is a 501c3 company that works throughout the country and quite a bit in this area to strengthen educator and system leader capacity to break down barriers and increase access, belonging, and success in rigorous college and career prep secondary school courses for students of color and low-income students, so they may thrive in their post-secondary pursuits and life goals. When we first started with them, they came to us and said, look, here's our goal. We want to make sure that your enrollments and in your AP classes match your demographics, right? So I think that's to some degree the question you're asking, Jill. Are our percentage of Hispanic students in the school representative in that AP class? Correct.
Thank you.
So on the next slide, again, it's tiny, and I apologize, but this is the data they gave me. This is for our 12th graders last year. And the way EOS kind of comes up with its numbers, it suggests that you should target to have the same percentage of students in your middle to high income white category, that same representative sample of all groups be there, right? So what this chart is showing is that, and the numbers are down there at the bottom of the number of kids in each pile. If a kid if it's the dark blue, that's a student who just took an AP class and nothing else. and no dual credit. If they're green, they took an AP class and a dual credit class, at least. And if it's sort of goldenrod, that's just kids who took a dual credit class. So what we're really focusing on, and what we're pretty proud of with this senior class, because AP is important, but AP is not right for every kid, right? So dual credit gets them actual college credit. Dual credit gets them a grade on a transcript that goes with them to a college. That red line is our target line, and we just about hit it with all of our groups. And you can kind of see the N groups, the N is down there at the bottom. So for our Asian median high income, there's 17 students, we went beyond that red line. For our African American medium high income students, there's 17 students, and we're just underneath that line, right? One more student would meet it. We didn't put the charts there for the students of under 10. If you look at our Hispanic Latinx, our low-income Spanish Latinx kids are taking the dual credit classes. They're not necessarily taking the AP classes, but they are taking the dual credit classes. They're getting that college experience. I think to some of what we talked about earlier, a lot of that is in those career tech areas. They're getting that opportunity. And then our multiracial, and that number really fluctuates. It is very self-identified. And then our white, non-Hispanic.
So Jill, that kind of gets at your question as to like what % of those student groups are taking the classes.
Right, okay.
So we're at nearly 70% of our medium to high income Black African American students taking either AP or dual credit.
And then when we go back, so if we're looking at that page with the yellow on it, and then if you go back to the chart with passing exams, that would be low income and high, and so that would combine the income levels together. Okay. Thank you.
EOS also has a focus, their goal.
Scott, real quick.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, well, sorry, related to this, but it's different. It's in the documentation that's not in the chart. So I love seeing this and what kids are taking the classes. And then, but back to the EOS, there was a page that I had a question on, so I don't know if this is the right time or not to ask. Okay. So it has the number of students recommended and then the number of exams, I'm assuming, taken by the EOS recommended kids. But then it has a number of courses not taken or completed. So does that mean that of the kids that are, I'm trying to understand are kids dropping courses?
Some are, yes.
Okay, so then I wanted to ask a little bit about like the identification process and the support that they're getting, because we had talked about that early on, like throughout with EOS.
And some of it is they're not able to take the class because of their schedule.
Okay, so I just wanted to understand it, because it seems like a high number relative to the number of students recommended, so, and the number of exams taken, so I just wanted to understand it a little bit more.
I was even thinking this is the first year we're having like AP African American Studies. We have one section. We have more kids who wanted to take that, but then all of them couldn't, it would fit into their schedule.
Okay.
So we have lots of things like that.
Okay, that's helpful.
And also sometimes those 123 students are recommended for multiple AP classes, and they might choose just to take one. But because they were recommended for multiple, that's counting as like they didn't take it.
Okay,
Does
all
that
right.
make sense?
That's helpful. Yeah, it does. Thank you, sorry.
No, that's good. One of the things that EOS talks about too, their goal is to make sure that students who, and I can talk about how we identify students because we just did it. Students take a survey, and in that survey they talk about their future plans, they talk about what their careers might be, what kind of post-secondary education they're looking at, and they also answer some questions about what are some barriers that you have to taking advanced classes, not just AP, but advanced classes, but also what are some learning conditions that you demonstrate that would recommend you to do well in a higher level class. That all comes together and creates an insight card. And just last week, we sat down and looked at about 250 insight cards and had some conversations at table groups with teachers and administrators saying, okay, here's what we know about this kid, here's the classes they've taken, here's their future interests, here are the barriers that they have, but also here are the strengths that they're showing and that they're demonstrating, and their GPA and some of their test score data, all that sort of mixed in. What class would we recommend this kid? So those have all been done. We're then collating all that information, and Dr. Rowe and I are going to then invite those kids to a lunch to talk about, hey, here's some opportunities for you. Here's some classes you could take. Not all kids come to the lunch. That's okay. Some of them sign up for classes anyway. Some of them might have done it no matter what, whether we target them or not. But in any case, those are the kids we target, and this year we've even gotten more specific. So in this survey, I wanted to find out specifically those students in those categories where we're not hitting that target. Who are those kids? And let's look at their data. Counselors are giving us some information on those kids. Again, the whole point of this is not to get a kid into an AP class. The whole point of this is to get a kid to be challenged with college level work prior to leaving high school, so they don't go and start spending tuition money and dropping out, right? We want them to be ready, we want them to be prepared. So in that sense, we're also making recommendations to dual credit classes, because those are things that they can earn credit in as well. So we're pretty excited about where we are, and the focus really is definitely on 10th graders, because we have so many options junior year. It's also harder if a student hasn't taken an advanced class until senior year. It's that much of a barrier for them to feel like they belong, and that's one of the questions I asked them. And kids will say in that survey, I don't feel like I would belong in that class. I don't feel like I would, right? That doesn't mean we don't put them in there. But it's important that you see more of that in the 11th graders who haven't taken an advanced class yet. So, so one of the things that EOS says, they don't really necessarily care what the kid gets on the AP test, right? We do. So we shared that with you because we're pretty proud of it. So even though they say the important thing is that they just take the class, even if they don't do well in the test, our kids have done really well in the test. Nearly 65%, 62% last year, 66% this year, got a 3 or higher on those tests. These are kids who would not have taken the class otherwise, very likely, without being identified and being encouraged to do it. And then the very next slide there is the full distribution, and this is a really solid distribution. I know a lot when we first started, there was concerns by teachers that we would have all these ones, and we have almost no ones. It's really low number. The 3 is certainly the most frequent score, but the 3 gets you the credit at the schools, especially in Illinois. So you have 3 4s, and then the kids who haven't taken one yet who are getting 5s are like, okay. We kind of circle back to them. Dr. O likes to talk to those kids and say, look, what could we do differently? What could we have done? And a lot of times it's kids who've transferred, and when kids transfer in, we don't have that history. And we need to make sure we meet them where they are when they come in. So we're pretty proud of that data as well. Also wanted to give you a little bit of history. So when you look at AP-wise historically, in 1998, we had 23 AP classes and a whopping 233 students were taking them. That's a very small number. We had an extremely elite AP program in 1998. And I mentioned 1998 only because that's when I took over in this role and started collecting the data. So that kind of tells you where kids were, and kids did well. We were ranking at the time right under New Trier as frequency of kids getting 5s on the tests. But notice what's happened is we've expanded some of the courses, but we've opened up access to more kids. We've gotten almost 7 times as many kids in AP classes since 1998. We've gotten almost a little over 6 times as many tests given, and our numbers really have not dropped off. If anything, they're better than they were in 1998. So, that perception that AP is only for a certain slice of kid is not true. And things like EOS, things like our pathways of courses where students, by the time in English, you kind of get to a point where you've got to either take dual credit or AP or you stay at a prep level. It's getting kids in there and they're doing well. And so it has become less of an elite program, and it's become more open for more kids, and that's something that we're all really proud of. So that's just a little snapshot of kind of where we are. This is the highest we've ever been with number of tests and number of kids, and we expect, hope, plan on it being higher again next year.
This is a good, I like.
This is one of
This-
the
I
biggest
like-
celebrations
yeah.
of the night. 7 times as many kids taking it, and the performance has actually increased.
It's actually
in terms
gotten
of-
better, yeah.
It's actually gotten better.
This like kind of summarizes it all.
Yep.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
And then the next slide, I think, is even more tremendous.
Yep.
Dual credit is a relatively new thing. Thank you. Right. I was just at a meeting at COD today for superintendents and curriculum directors about dual credit, and they were sort of touting some good statistics. Same thing, in 2006, we only had 5 what were called at that time articulated courses. So if you got a good grade at LT and went to COD, you got credit. We had no idea how many kids did it, but that was all we had. And then we had 1 class at Triton. We now have, as you can see there, over 3,000 kids enrolled in dual credit classes, earning college credit, having the opportunity to earn college credit. And the number of courses across 5 different colleges and universities is over 30. So we actually have more dual credit courses than AP classes now. And that just keeps growing. We have another one to add. We'll be able to add our healthcare careers classes, a dual credit course. All of our teachers have been vetted and approved for that starting next year. We've got the biggest yoga program in the state. And they are all getting dual credit, which is pretty darn cool. At this meeting today, and Dr. Waterman doesn't even know this, we are the number 5 high school that sends kids to COD with dual credit. So it's pretty awesome stuff. So again, this is all about access and opportunity, and we've got nearly 70% of our kids participating in these 2 programs.
Question about the Advanced Placement Act. So that was designed to, I think, do a lot of what Equal Opportunity Schools is doing for us, right? They're pushing kids with test scores that may show that they can do well in these classes, and yet nobody's talking to them, nobody's pushing them to do that. And I know there was some legislation, honestly, I can't even remember where it landed, that they were modifying to say that they don't automatically go in there, but we're recommending. Have we seen with that legislation any shift in what we were already doing, or we were just already doing it through Equal Opportunity Schools?
No, we definitely have seen a shift. I mean, the Automatic Accelerated Placement Act did focus on if kids are showing a particular test score and they're not in an advanced class, you should move them up a level.
Yeah.
Right? And because we have 3 levels, ours is a little different. Some schools have really struggled with this because they don't have an accelerated level. So they're taking kids who have been at that prep level and jumping them into honors classes. We have a little more of a stair-step approach. So we haven't really seen kids struggling. I know some high schools are really seeing kids struggling with that act because they've placed there, but they haven't really been in that sort of rigorous course. It's too big of a jump. We haven't really seen that. Okay. One of our goals was to triangulate all that, but I haven't gotten around to that yet. But it's a good question. I mean, the idea is a good one, but again, it's sort of relying more on just one metric, that standardized test score, and then we added a grade metric. So we wanted the student to be successful. So there are a lot of kids who test really well, but who don't perform well in classes. We wanted the 2 to match if we were going to automatically move a kid up. So we're about ready to start that whole process up again for next year. The challenge with that one is you've got to use old data. You've got to use 2-year-old data in order to move a kid up, because by the time you get the new data, you've already placed kids in classes. And so
You've already staffed too for the year, so it's tough.
yeah, but again, I think it's the right idea. In that, identify the kid who maybe a parent isn't advocating for it, or maybe the kid is just sort of coasting, or whatever it is. Or maybe teachers haven't believed in it because the kid doesn't turn in all their work or whatever. This is a way to catch a kid, and that's good. Again, anything we can do to give a kid that access and that opportunity. So it gets us to the report card. So the report card has a lot of information in it. We're definitely not going to go on the website and show you all about it. You can spend hours there. But we do want to talk in particular about how we got to a designation. And in particular, as you can see, all the things that are there. So to be exemplary, you need to be in the top 10% of schools with no underperforming student groups. I think that second bullet point is really important. We don't have, even though we have gaps, our students are not underperforming compared to the state. Now, good, bad, or otherwise, you can't be exemplary unless all of your student groups are performing, and that you have a graduation rate greater than 67%. I'm going to get into the specifics of it in just a bit. We were really close last year from what we were told, and there were a couple things that we did that Dr. Terrell's going to talk about in just a moment that I think really pushed us over the edge. And again, it's not about test prep, and it's not about some of the pieces that you see here or that we've been talking about all night. The actual summative designation is comprised of two areas, academic and school quality and student success. There's been some criticism in the press about the fact that half of your rating is your graduation rate. We have a solid graduation rate, right? But we have always. That's not a number that's really changed a lot. Your English language arts proficiency and your math proficiency is 7.5%, so that SAT data that we were looking at, that's only 15% of our overall rating. Also, that science test, that's 5%, and then our English learner progress to proficiency is 5%, and that's the kids who come in at a certain place on that access test and then advance and show growth. That's worth the same as the science test. So that's been one that we've had some challenges with, and we saw some tremendous growth this year. In the school quality and student success indicators, these are things that really are more about school experience. So chronic absenteeism is worth 10%. That's a statewide, nationwide challenge, absenteeism, and we've been tackling that head on. Climate survey, I'll be frank, you just have to get a percentage of kids to take the survey. It's not about what they say, it's did they click through it and finish it. That's 6.67%. That's worth more than the science test. That's worth more than progress to proficiency. And then lastly, our 8th graders on track, which is a relatively new measure, but ninth graders on track. How many of our 9th graders are earning 1 or fewer Fs and are getting through their core graduation requirements? So if you go to the next slide, this shows you kind of where we ended up percentage-wise. Our ELA proficiency was 52.24. Remember that from those earlier slides. The math was 52.76. But that does put us, as far as math, we're in the 93rd percentile statewide with that number. For English, we were in the 91st percentile overall with our number of 52.24%. And then for science at 71, that was at 88%. We then also, for graduation rate, we are at 95.73, combining the 4, 5, and 6-year graduation rate. And then that, what we call P2P, English Learner Progress to Proficiency, we had 41.1% of our English learners meet their yearly targets, which is really tremendous. We had not seen that previously. So in the school quality and success, our chronic absenteeism was at 22%. Our climate survey, we got 91% of those kids take that survey. And 9th grade on track was at 98.39. Notice the things that we've been spending most of the time tonight are not the things measured most. So I wanted to have Dr. Terrell talk a little bit about what we've been doing to really target some of these areas that also make a really big difference.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So before I kind of dig into a couple of the metrics, I think it's really important that we have a balance, right? And I think that's this team and our greater staff team's approach as well. We want to celebrate accomplishments and celebrate improvement and celebrate growth, but we are always relentlessly pursuing those areas that we still need to grow in and gaps that we need to continue to close. So certainly being exemplary in terms of our rating and being in the top 10% in the state of Illinois is something to celebrate, especially with some gains that we've shown in some of these metrics. But certainly we know that we have a ton of work to do, and I think tonight's conversation really illustrates that. So just a little bit more on the scorecard, and I'm a scorecard person, so I like to track the metrics, right? When we developed our strategic plan, we were really intentional about the metrics that we developed. And part of our process, our community's process in identifying metrics, was looking at the Illinois School Report Card and those metrics that our state assesses as part of the report card process. So I think it's really important that we just note that, right? We picked these metrics that we have within our strategic plan in alignment to the metrics that the state looks at through the report card process. From a point standpoint, last year to this year, we had full points last year and this year for our ELA proficiency, graduation rate, science proficiency, math proficiency. So those areas really, the percentages may have changed, but from a report card standpoint, we achieved full points from one year to the next. Climate survey, as Scott mentioned, is percentage of students who take the climate survey. We saw a small decline from last year to this year because of our opt-out 2 years ago to last year, so 23 to 24, because of our percentage of students opting out. So we've made an adjustment in our process for opt-outs that we think will help us get to that 95% in current year that hopefully will be reflected in the future. But 3 areas that this board and our team should be really proud of that we showed improvement in. First is our EL progress to proficiency. We have identified multilingual, bilingual programming as an area of focus and an area that we are going to put significant resources into, and it made a difference, right? It made a difference when we look at that metric. Certainly, we also saw earlier that we have a higher percentage of students who are exiting from our access test, but also that contributes to other metrics as well. Our EL students performed better across other metrics than they have previously as well. We saw better attendance. We saw, not included within the report card, better student behaviors, so improvement when we're looking at student behaviors. I don't think that we had a single ninth grade ML student fail a 9th grade course last year. Well, then that's contributing to the freshman on track metric as well. So can't understate the significant impact that bilingual, multilingual programming, hiring staff, sheltering courses, and working on development of that program had on our students' overall experience, not just within that metric, but across all metrics. Freshmen on track and graduation rate have been really big areas of focus for our building leadership team and our student support teams over the course of the last few years. So starting in 21-22, when Adam Davis, the senior AP, had his freshman class, SSTs really dug in and focused on that metric. So they kind of reframed some of the discussion about student grades, reframe those to talk about on track. And so it's been a priority area and an area of focus, and we've seen gradual improvement in that metric. Last year's freshman class, so Monique Gatuszewski's class, along with that class of 2027 student support team, 98.8% on track. That's extraordinary. But that's the efforts of 9th grade teachers, departmental interventions and supports, the work of the SST. And when we talk about those metrics that we're tracking, the leading indicators that we're looking at on a very regular basis, they show up right there. It's grades, it's absenteeism and attendance data, it's regular behaviors. So the freshman on track percentage is really significant. Last year was the first year that we started a freshman success study hall. So by the end of first quarter, we had identified students who had multiple D's and F's, multiple failing grades, and put those students in a targeted study hall to give them some extra support and executive functioning, more contacts with counselors, social workers, and also dedicated teachers to work with them and help them make connections with other teachers. And the data that we have from that intervention was really, really strong. So that was something that we were really proud of last year and that we're duplicating again this year with this class of freshmen. And then absenteeism, I wish we were better. I wish we were in a better place. We've shown gradual improvement, as we're focusing on that for our PTA BIC this year, and I think we're going to come out of that committee's work with some additional things that we can do from an intervention and communication standpoint. But we've done a lot of work in terms of standardizing and systematizing interventions, communication, connections with families that really extend across all SSTs. So really proud of our growth in those three areas, and really they touch every part of our school community. And so it's something that really everybody, no matter what their role here, should be able to celebrate, because these are really important areas of growth.
That's great, thank you.
That's why it's not just a goal one report tonight.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Which also leads us to the equity journey continuum. So
That's the last piece, right?
that's right.
This is the last piece of it?
Yeah, we're getting there.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
We gotta talk about what we're doing, to fix all this.
Right, right.
Oh, my goodness. All right, the Equity Journey Continuum is an informational tool to help districts view their data through the lens of equity. It identifies gaps in student achievement, opportunities, and support by analyzing data that districts already collect and report to IASB. This is the third year of the inclusion of the Equity Journey Continuum, and this informational tool assists in tracking progress towards closing achievement gaps in student achievement, opportunities, and support. And this year's assessment, so when we're looking at this year's assessment report card data, it will be reflected on next year's Equity Journey Continuum. All right, next slide. The Equity Journey Continuum looks at three data areas: student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. Student learning utilizes data about student achievement, English learner proficiency and former EL or ML data, graduation rates, and access to AP and dual credit courses. The learning condition element considers expulsion and suspension rates, student attendance, and climate and survey results. The elevating educators measure looks at educator, student, and administrator demographics, teacher education and evaluation, and teacher qualifications. The Illinois State Board of Education utilizes a series of formulas to calculate a level 1 through 4 in each of the three categories for each school district. Level 1 indicates that the district has large equity gaps in that area, while a level 4 signifies minimal equity gaps. This year, with the Equity Journey Continuum, it identified that we moved from having large gaps in student learning to moderate gaps. We remained with moderate gaps for learning conditions, and we moved from having small gaps for elevating educators to now only having minimal gaps. The work outlined in our strategic plan is continuing to help guide our work as we actively seek to not just identify gaps, but create opportunities to eliminate them, while ensuring we also foster a restorative culture of belonging for all students.
Just to reiterate, that data is not from 23-24. That data is from 22-23. So the data you saw tonight will lead to next year's equity rating. And you can hear each of the things we've been talking about tonight are part of those three areas. We fully expect to see growth in those areas for next year as well. So, and we saw growth from the year before that. All right. So lots of observations as well. We've covered most of this, I believe. But it's worth saying we have an exemplary rating for the first time. It's worth saying again.
That's a huge celebration. That is a huge celebration.
Yes, it is.
Our combined graduation rate is over 95%. Our ninth grade on track is 98%. Again, those are great numbers. And really, as Dr. Trell mentioned, takes a village. It's a lot of work to do that. And then chronic absenteeism does remain high. It remains high nationwide. I think it confounds all of us, honestly. But it's a post-pandemic reality. But it's getting better. And I think, again, with more incentives, and again, this is where we talk about the SEL components, and this is where we talk about belonging and getting involved in activities and clubs. This is a way that a kid wants to come to school, right? It's not, you want to provide all of that. So we're certainly targeting all of those areas. So as far as 24-25 goes, in particular in Goal 1, We are, this year, working on that junior core curriculum, continuing that curriculum review process for freshman and sophomore course teams, making sure that those maps are getting completed. Actually, I, along with 3 of our chairs, have been chosen to present at Learning Forward in December about our curriculum maps and our curriculum review process. So we'll be sharing our process, our method. We've been told, and I guess this is the reality of the world today, we're very excited to show how SEL and cultural responsiveness are part of our maps. We've been told that some people might not accept that as being something they would use, and that's fine. We believe in it, and we're going to talk about it. So we're excited about that. We've updated the syllabus for all of our updated curriculum. So we have every one of our course syllabi on the website now, but as we update the syllabus through the curriculum review process, those new ones for freshmen and sophomores are all up there, which is exciting. For engaging in equitable learning experiences, that's our strategy 2. We've added a new day of teacher training about teaching diverse learners. Our PLCs are really focused about engagement strategies, about changing habits, about increasing rigor, all those components, and doing it through short, sharp, repeatable strategies that teachers and kids can use every day. That's our partnership with Michael McDowell, which he was just here for an Institute Day. And actually, usually Institute Day you get kind of a wide range of people's feelings. It was the most positive Institute Day feedback we've gotten in a long time. People really like the fact that we're focusing on classroom strategies and not some big pie in the sky sort of things, although it does both. So. We are partnering with Equal Opportunity Schools for a 4th year. As I said, we've just taken a look at those insight cards. We're putting those all together to invite more students to have that access to those higher level courses and AP courses. Co-teaching is now part of all of our junior year courses this year. We've investigating additional career pathways so students have a reason and a purpose for taking the courses. That's as part of our curriculum review, aligning those pathways in particular this year with all the elective programs. Our elective teachers aren't used to being part of curriculum reviews and part of some of these larger things, and we're doing that. And then we're also looking at those systematic curricular supports at Tier 1, which a lot of what we're doing through professional learning. And then lastly, we've sort of thought a little differently about this strategy 3. If we're going to be consistent with assessment and feedback, we want to make sure our teachers are providing quality feedback through the formative assessment process, supported by our shift in our PLC structure to really work on those strategies. We really expect for 25-26 we'll be focusing on formative and summative assessment writing and clarification of that. Our PLCs are reviewing their grade books for consistency, and that assessment literacy I mentioned we'll be working on. And then standardized assessment wise, we're just getting out as ahead of ACT as we can and sharing as much information as we can, and helping parents understand what their access map, SAT, ACT scores mean. So we're busy, we're focused, and really we're proud, but also knowing that we've got some areas to really focus on. And I think because we focused on these bigger issues earlier, we can really hone in now on those areas that need the most attention. So that's what our DELT team is in particular working on, in particular for not only this year, but for next year. So we're looking at what are some short, easy things we can fix now, what are some medium range things we can really focus on for next year, and what sort of long range, big picture, what if we did this, we're having those conversations as well, and that's being led by everyone in this room. So
I think the key part of what Scott talked about there at the end was, we're certainly proud of the accomplishments, but we know we have so much more work to do. And I know personally grateful to this board for continuing to support all of the work that's happening. Kudos to everyone around this table, but honestly, our whole admin team, from everyone here, plus associate principals, division chairs, assistant principals, equity ambassadors, co-teaching mentors, PLC leaders, instructional coaches, tech coaches, all of the really the teacher leaders in our school that really roll their sleeves up and do the day-to-day work is what makes this happen. So again, I can't say any better than what Scott ended there with, is that we are proud, but we know that we have to continue to persist and do more.
Way to go. I feel like we should get.
I know.
It's like, big deal. Congratulations.
And that was a lot of information.
This was
in
a lot
an
tonight,
hour and a
but
half. It always
worth
is.
the applause
We didn't
and
even get to
celebration.
the 3 reports that you got.
Right.
We hit the highlights, so we'll get to that. Any other questions or?
The only thing I really want to hit on what Joy had just, I mean, like, I know how hard it is to get that rating. It is not easy. I mean, like, when we found out that you got that, I was immediately like, oh my, like, that's huge. Not a lot of schools get that rating, and it is a lot of work. And I feel like we need, I mean, like, can we do a parade? Can we send out some, like, we need to be advertising and, like, really celebrating this, because it's huge.
It is. Yeah. And it's the first time.
It's the first time ever that rating ever, and so, like, it needs, I don't know, I feel like we need to do a really good job of celebrating
it.
Patting our, again, I agree with you, we got a lot of work to still do, but.
A couple things on that. Certainly last Wednesday when the embargo was lifted, 9 a.m., we did some social media, website promotions. We're in the process of planning something for our staff over the next week or two.
Nice.
But certainly open to ideas for our team, what we can do to continue to celebrate it publicly, because it is something worthy of sharing and being proud of.
Absolutely huge.
And I think maybe just even breaking it down to what it means more, like that you know what I mean, like when you have, like, you'll drive by Ogden and there's like, they have the Blue Ribbon School sign out there, things like that. You know what I mean, I think it wasn't spring, like, a couple of the other schools around have it, but really great to see, like, something like that, to maybe get some press on that. Maybe it'd be great to see a patch article on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
That'd be great.
So, just putting that out there. And, but I mean, just, like, put, like, you know, we put a sign up for homecoming.
Right.
You know what I mean? And welcome back to school, like, put, like, a 5-foot banner outside both of them and make it like a flag.
I have the design if the boss says yes, I have the design ready to go.
That's what I'm saying, but something like that.
We will brainstorm that as a team. For sure.
I think that would be
What
really
else we
great
can
to
do.
see, like, something more that, like, kind of, you know, a little something more permanent.
Permanent is nice, but I'm glad that you said, you know, doing something to celebrate your staff has made it happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you know, they are so deserving and will appreciate whatever that looks like.
Yep. That'll be a surprise.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm still open to the idea of a parade.
You just love to watch.
You wanna
some
ride-
I love a
candy?
good parade.
Do you want to throw out some candy?
Tim
I'm my
wants to ride
father's
on top of
son.
the fire
I
truck.
love a good parade.
Well, and I'm just gonna
Fantastic. Yeah.
I mean,
this
I just
is
want to say,
great.
like, so for me, like, you know, obviously, like, seeing from the EL standpoint, like, that is something that's so near and dear to me. To see such a change there, like, I mean, almost brought to tears here to see where we were, like, 8 years ago. You know what I mean? Or 7 years ago, I don't even know time, lost track of time, where it was like a forgotten piece, and that it was just overlooked, if you will. And now to have it be so much greater, to see that there's even, you know, like, to have it be above state standards before, when it was so not even at that level, where I was like, not understanding it as a parent or anything, and to see that there is so much progress that's been made, to me, is just remarkable. So I thank you for everybody here that, you know, listened in these meetings, and even to have the score here, that it wasn't even a metric that we did before, so I thank you for that.
Yep.
This is great. Thank you, everybody. This was a tremendous, tremendous amount of work. Not just to get here, but then to be able to put it together in a cohesive way for us to be able to have this conversation. So, thank you so much. All right, we can move on to public participation, but I think we can even keep going. And that's it, actually. So, that's going to conclude our business. So,
Well, no,
but
no,
now.
We have one, yeah, we want to dismiss CLT.
Right.
And then go into.
And then we'll
VRES,
go
yeah.
into IASB. So, but that from that business.
And we'll, while we do this, we'll keep the live stream going.
Okay, perfect. All right. Good night. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Too.
Thank you. Thank you.
You were fine, okay. You can always just steal it. So great to see you again.
Absolutely thrilled. Thank you.
That's right.
Oh, an opportunity to stand while we're
Yes.
breaking.
So,
No, I know.
IAS, oh, perfect. Are we good? They did it once. Okay, great. Thank you so much. The IASB resolutions process provides boards of education throughout the state with an opportunity to participate in the advocacy process with the Illinois Association of School Boards. The IASB Delegate Assembly will take place on Saturday, November 22nd, 2024, and will involve one board member voting on a variety of resolutions on behalf of the BOE. The board will now discuss each of these resolutions and take a straw poll. And I just want to thank Jill again for being that board member who will be our delegate. So, everybody should have had a copy. And Dr. Waterman, do you want to guide us
I would
here?
just add in there that the key word there is advocacy. So this is not binding legislation. These are resolutions that essentially guide the Illinois Association of School Boards on what legislative efforts they should get behind, so to speak. The one thing that's interesting is it's a little bit different this year or the voting process is a little bit different this year than it was last year. They're actually utilizing a consent agenda this year, which they didn't in the past. Previously, the voting delegate, when they would go to the assembly, each issue was presented and then the voting delegate would vote yes or no on behalf of their board. This time, they've actually grouped the resolutions into two categories, and the first 6 resolutions are all going to be placed on one consent agenda. So the dual language, EBF, TIF accountability, FACE law, healthcare coverage, and polling place. As we talked about, Jill's going to be the voting delegate. That will essentially be one vote on a consent agenda. However, at the assembly, someone can poll, they can poll and separate one of those items. So really what you guys need to decide as a board tonight is on Saturday, November 23rd, or whatever that date is, when Jill's down there, if they were to pull, for example, dual language off of the consent agenda, how would this board want Jill to vote on that?
Well, and the one thing that they said when I did my training was that to ask the board, because it might go up for discussion. So if I felt like, do you want me to stick to our vote no matter what? Or do you want me to represent us to the best that I can based upon what I think we would do and allow us to change the vote if there was a really hefty, good discussion?
Compelling discussion, yeah.
Because obviously I can't get to you all while they're discussing it, but so how do you want me to vote? Do you want me to rely upon our discussion here, or do you want to give me permission to say you can change your vote based upon the discussion if you feel like that's what we would want to do? So that was the one question I was supposed to ask the board.
For each of those.
I think
Right.
that's good.
Yeah.
I would say, why don't we go through these and we'll be better informed by where everybody is to answer that question? Because I
Okay.
mean, I have my initial reaction to that, but I don't want to say before we talk
Right, so
through.
that's something just to think
Yeah.
in here to give me, to say, you know what, I don't, it doesn't seem like there's anything, it's like, we've had some in the past, some controversial
Right.
ones where I know we've been split, or I've been split from the rest, I don't know, for that, but, so, like that, just keep that in mind as we're
Sure.
discussing it, because I do want to make sure that I represent everybody here appropriately and accurately.
Thank you.
Okay. So they just start with.
So you're going to keep track
Yeah,
on that,
I'll
okay,
keep-
'cause that's the
I'll
one they
kinda make-
showed us, or do you want me to keep track of that?
No,
Because that's the one.
I'll keep track.
You got, yeah,
Yeah, that worked out well for both of us, Brian.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
that's great.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Winner, Maryland's the
Right.
winner.
Marilyn's like, we gotta move this party along.
I know we all, so is our approach, we've all been through this, so
Not,
Not
only,
everybody.
oh, 2 of us haven't. I don't think Paula's done it.
Yes, Paul and Joanne would not have been through it.
would not have read through the
Oh, I
resolutions
thought you
before we
Oh,
came
I
here?
thought you said been through
read
it.
through
No,
it.
been
I'm
through the-
sorry, I meant like, do
I
we
thought
have
you
to
meant
talk
like we've
about?
experienced it. I'm like,
Right.
It's
No,
really
no,
been
no,
something
no.
to experience. You
I'm
have
sorry.
missed out, but you were
We
here
have
today.
absorbed the content on the table today, like the resolutions, right?
Yes.
So I guess my question to the group is, when we get to one, I don't know what you were thinking, Brian, but would we just like, if there's something somebody wants to talk about, or just go to a straw
I mean, you
poll?
could
Like,
take this in one chunk and say the IASB Resolutions Committee is recommending those first 6 do adopt. So you could say, are there any of those 6, just start with that question, or are there any
Yeah.
of those 6 that someone would say, I don't agree with adopting that?
I just don't want to sit and read through all
Right.
of them if
That
every
would
single one.
streamline the process a lot.
Yeah, let's go to it if we need to.
You don't want to read through each one?
Do you want to?
No. I just asked.
Again, that's just a recommendation.
It's a question, I'm
Because
asking.
it will streamline it. Like,
Yeah.
is there any of those 6 that someone says, you know what, I don't agree with?
Or do you want to discuss it? Because I think that
Or
would be
you wanna
helpful to
discuss it,
me
yeah,
if they pull them off to discuss for that.
Yep.
Then we should do what you're comfortable with because you're going to be the delegate, so you should maybe, do you want to?
Sure, I mean, I would just say, if there's anybody that has like some thoughts on it or concerns or something like that, that might be helpful if they change it, because I'm just nervous if they change it. And I'm like, gosh, that really makes a lot of sense that where we would be, so I don't know what they would change on this, but just putting that out there.
Are you asking about dual language or all the
All
first
of them.
6?
I would just say the first
Got it.
6. I mean, you know what I mean? Doesn't seem like there's a lot that we would need to make sure we went in order.
I would just say for me, like these, I mean, it all seemed pretty straightforward this go-round.
I would agree, but
Yeah, I don't have any issue with them.
I have no issues with any of these. In fact, I rather like them. These first 6, this 1 through 6. In particular, the faiths law. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
And that face law one is slightly, if you guys remember from last year, it's slightly different. So last year, someone put a resolution on this list to allow school districts to be able to use sex offender databases
Right.
to comply with face law,
Yeah.
which really defeats the purpose of face law. The idea of face law is employment history and to try to uncover other cases.
Right.
So I think this school district came back, this school board came back and said, okay, now we understand why that would defeat face law. Now let's just advocate for setting up a new agency at the state level that would help school districts
Yeah.
comply with face law.
I
And that
think
makes-
it's really
that makes the
important.
most
I mean,
sense.
I think
Last
that
year
there
was
are a lot of
DCFS, I
people who
think,
fall
wasn't
through
It was
those cracks.
DCS, yeah.
So,
And I
Michael and
questioned
Joya
that last
For
year.
the straw poll, we need to know Michael and Joya.
what?
What do we
For
need
the
to
straw
know?
poll, so far, Paula.
what's your opinion on
Joe
1 through
Gretsch
6?
and Joe Beta Daniels have said that.
Yeah,
they
I'm
want to
just
roll with
looking
it.
at the TIF one.
I'm comfortable with all of them.
Yeah, same.
I am as well. I actually was surprised that the faiths law resolution did not already exist, to tell you the truth.
No, I thought it did.
Well, face law is
Something-
in
No, I
place,
do.
but school districts are
Right.
responsible for kind of managing themselves.
Unfunded mandates.
This essentially says, let's
Yes.
set up a state agency that will help schools do it, so.
That's
yeah.
what was surprising,
Yeah.
that we didn't have
Something,
some
yeah.
entity that was helping us ensure that this was actually happening.
Yeah. This has really fallen on like HR departments.
Right.
Within individual schools.
I mean, I think it's good to have consistency.
Yep.
So the TIF, can you explain?
So you agree on the other ones?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So let's talk about the TIF one.
Well, I just need to know, like, is it asking for creating this, like, I don't know what is that?
It's going to reform the TIF process in a manner that's.
Is it setting up some standards in the TIF process?
That's how I took it, because it gave some backstory here that it hasn't been revisited in like decades.
Yeah, 40 years.
I mean, I don't have the history with it, but that it was time to put some guardrails
It
in
was
place.
Yeah.
It was trying to keep more money in the coffers of the schools instead of them being, is the way I was interpreting it.
Okay.
Yeah, so this just really advocates for a stronger position, to give schools a stronger position when faced with a TIF decision from a local municipality.
And just, I mean, I know this is a little bit outside, but we've not had any, in like a long time, any municipalities asking for
We had
TIFs?
one from Western Springs maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it's nothing recent.
Okay.
Well, LaGrange did TIF like how long ago? Like 15, 20 years ago? Would have been a long time ago.
It was like
I do
20.
remember the Western Springs one, it was, probably 8 to 10 years ago, but LaGrange would have been before that.
I think it was. It was a while ago. Like that's when they first did movie theater stuff. and
The
everything
only
like that.
thing that this resolution does not pinpoint, which is different than the Faith's Law resolution, is that there's no accountability. There's no due process in terms of how is this going to actually come to fruition? Who is going to hold villages and cities accountable to ensuring that schools do have equitable or some form of TIF funding that actually is designated towards them or for their use. So it's too ambiguous right now. So that might come up in discussion.
Does that mean you're not supportive of it?
No, I do support it, because I do agree with
Okay.
it, but I think it needs a little bit of heftier language in terms of how do we make that happen? How do we increase accountability if it comes?
Okay. But I don't think that would be something I would get up and argue or discuss.
No, I can't imagine that one being pulled off.
Okay.
Like, of the consent agenda, but.
Okay.
I'm fine with it. Mayor,
I think
Thank
that
you.
covers all 6, right?
Yeah. All right,
Yeah,
then all
that covers
6 have-
the first 6.
Yep.
Okay, then so we actually went through this last year while we were at the delegate assembly because there was a resolution that could potentially have affected us.
So are you there with me?
Yeah, I went last year.
Oh,
Yeah,
that'll be fun, right?
yeah, it's great.
You sit in the back row,
Any
right?
other board member?
Actually, no, I can't. I have to sit along the wall.
Yeah.
Because the middle is only the delegate, so I sit along
Right,
the wall.
there's like chairs in the
Yeah,
back.
Yeah,
Well, they didn't give me
We're
a
like
lay
that
out
last
of the
time.
room. I
I'll
just
be in the
was
peanut
like,
gallery.
Right, yeah, but we
Literally.
can't run up and like
Credential to
pass
go
notes
in.
to her,
No.
right? Like that's.
maybe it's credentialed to get the clicker, huh?
Yes, you do need that.
So these are basically the next, how many are there? Some of them are 2, 8. The next 8 are, the recommendation is do not adopt, but at the delegate assembly, the district that filed this can appeal it. And then if they appeal it, there's a voting process that they go through to determine whether it becomes a discussion item first, and then whether it becomes voted upon second. So this is really giving Jill feedback for, if for some reason one of these 8 resolutions, the submitting district says, we want to appeal it,
Yeah.
and the whole delegate assembly votes to discuss and votes to put it back on the ballot, then Jill will need some direction on whether to basically go against the do not adopt recommendation. So you could look at this way. Again, the resolutions committee is saying don't adopt. Is there something on there where you would say to Jill, no, I actually want you to vote to adopt that? Go against what IASB is saying.
So maybe we go individually through each of
Yeah.
these.
Yep.
That be okay?
Sure. All right.
Or you could just handle it like you did the first time, where is there,
Oh, okay.
is there one of those resolutions?
There's one on there that I do like.
Okay.
It's the cell phone usage one.
I was gonna say, I like that too, because I feel like that would take the pressure off of us as a district to do that, because I think that's such a heated topic that, I don't know, I was thinking that too, but,
Yeah.
I mean.
I
a
understood the
huge topic.
argument, though, that it can be governed
Local
locally,
governance.
and we're doing that on our own here. Does it have to be something that is mandated? I mean, what if?
I think it
and I would
helps
have-
the schools,
I
in
do.
my opinion, because even if a school has a policy in place and the guidelines are in place, right now, a parent very easily can just lawyer up, come in and say, my kid is not submitting their phone, and they win. So I think this might give, the way I read it, is it might give some support back to the schools to say, listen, we're not trying to take them away, we're just trying to get back to the learning process, whatever that's going to look like for LT's policy, for, Oak Park's policy, and so on and so forth. That's how I read it. I don't know. I mean, it says the recommendation is to not adopt, but I disagree with that personally. my general feeling is, I think it supports the schools and gives them something to lean back on.
I look at this like a global, I look at this from a global lens. And we sued Meta, and we're gonna win that one, or we won that one, right? Like, we have the Illinois, what's his name? The
Attorney
General.
Attorney General came out and talked about how cell phones are negatively impacting our kids' mental health. There's research, there's policy, there's all kinds of things. Why would we not say, forget local control, smoking was bad. When we finally figured that out, we put rules in place, right?
Right.
We're now realizing that this is having the same global effect on our kids.
Mhm.
Why would we not put some legislation in the hands of our educational leaders to be able to say, this is wrong, and we're going to support you, school districts, to be able to say, enough is enough. I think that's part one. Part two of it is, and I just lost my train of thought. I'll come back to it. But I fully support, I know what I was going to say, is I think the trend in this over the last 10 years or so has been, well, and I'm not saying this lightly, but we want kids to have these in case of an emergency.
Right.
If there's an emergency, all these things are just going to get in the way with our first responders.
Right.
We need to have access to the phone lines to be able to get the people in place to keep people safe. We don't need, and I argued with my kids and my wife about this, we don't need you calling, I need you safe. And
Right.
if this is going to get in the way of you being safe because first responders can't access whatever telephone lines are, like,
And not only that, these spread false information. Right, and we've seen that right here at LT. I know we've seen it in my school. The second something happens, it's posted, it's texted, it's sent to a parent. A blast email goes out from the school, and the instant reaction is, I need to get in touch with my kid. Well, your kid is on the first floor in the east wing, and this incident is on the third floor in the west wing. They have no idea what's happening. They're going based on the Snapchats and the messages back and forth, and it spreads false information. And then we have a community of people, and whether that's here in Lyons Township or that's at any other high school in America, quite frankly, we have a community of parents who feel entitled to the information when they're not. You are not entitled to that information. It had nothing to do with your child. Your child was safe. They were in a soft lockdown. They were in a classroom with a student. So, no, we don't need to explain to you what happened. And they don't, our general public does not seem to understand that. They feel as though they're entitled to all information that happens within a school. I just feel like this really, Tim, you and I are on the same page, where I think this, if it were to be adopted, would simply provide school districts, superintendents like you, to be able to say, this is where we are coming from and this is why it's in place and here's our policy and how we're going to implement it.
I would love to hear from you on this, to see if there's anything where, like, I mean, is it supportive? Or is there something where it would make it harder for us to put things in place?
I mean, certainly the practicality of implementation would be really difficult to think through, because I'm thinking, for example, what would this look like in practice? So right now, classrooms have the ability to put phones in a pouch or whatever. Does this mean students are not allowed to bring their phone on campus at all? If some statewide act was put in place where kids can't have their phone on campus, I don't see that as realistic, because we have literally thousands of kids every day from 3:30 to 6 o'clock who really need their phone to get rides and to do whatever they need to do there. So in the absence of that, is it you just can't have your phone out from 8 to 3?
But the way that this
Things like
reads
that.
is that it strictly prohibits the use of.
Right.
Right, so it doesn't, I didn't read it as they're prohibited to bring them on
Bring them
campus.
with.
So just as an example, for the school districts that are using, say, Yonder pouches, they're
Yeah.
finding great success with that. they're still allowed to have them. They're not turning them into a teacher where the school is now liable or responsible for them. They're on their person. They simply are putting them away, keeping them in their backpack. They're locked in a sense that they can't access them until they walk up to the magnet and it unlocks it and they can use it immediately after school. And you put those at all the exits. It's a very smooth process. I have not read any information from the schools that are using Yonder pouches, just as an example. I'm not saying that Yonder needs to be the solution for everybody, but I've not read one thing that says that they are causing problems.
Yeah, this, specifically, school districts will be required to create policy that states that students may not use wireless communication devices during instructional time, or included in the,
Unless they have a healthcare condition or an IEP reason, right? Like, there's
Right.
exceptions in
and then
there.
legislation would allow schools to prohibit use of wireless communication during lunchtime and transitioning. And the IASB shall request that the legislator consider legislation that requires every school district to adopt a policy that prohibits and prevents student access to social media on internet access provided by the school district and district-owned devices. So, yeah, I mean, I guess my broad 100,000-foot view would be just the practicality of implementation would be really interesting to kind of sort
Yeah.
through.
Another state, right, like Florida put in some legislation for similar to, I don't know if it's similar to this, I think.
Yeah, I think they
I think
mentioned that in
Indiana
there.
did too.
I mean, I would say, I will say this, if there's any one of these 8 that are most likely to be pulled off for further discussion, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be shocked if it was.
This would be a
it's this
biggie.
one, This one.
I agree.
So you got 2 that are interested in actually adopting that.
I would be very open to it.
So 3,
and
so
ha-
what do the other 3 think?
I am open, I would love for this, I just didn't know if it's helps or hinders to have a mandate around it. So, yeah.
From a teacher
I
perspective,
think
helps.
Kind of reading the room here, I think maybe you have some direction to.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the majority. I would hate to disagree, but I think that we can make those mandates ourselves locally, but we don't choose to. So I think it's best left up for a local decision and not a state level mandate.
After discussion and hearing the comparison to smoking,
It's a good
you
one.
know, it really, and knowing the impact on mental health, just in general, I actually have changed my vote. I do think that we should adopt it, or consider to adopting it, or not include it in the do not adopt.
Right.
So I understand I'm supportive of it. And having 2 children that went to a school that did not allow cell phone use during the day, I thought that was much more positive. Like, you know what I mean? And I really am 100% supportive of it, and I like the idea of a mandate, because I feel like that gives us some direction.
Yep.
And we've been able to make our policy on it, but yet we haven't, because I do fear that there would be very controversial within the community, and it might be something that we wouldn't maybe put at the forefront to address, so it'd be nice to have that, you know, support, to have that support and that twisting our arm, if you will, to do it, which I think would be great, so.
So here's how that could look on that Saturday then. So Edwardsville is the school district that submitted that. If they appeal it, they will put it on the ballot to see if it should be reconsidered, and it requires a 2/3 vote to be
Correct.
reconsidered. So you would first have to cast a vote to reconsider it. And
Okay.
you would vote yes. You would say, yes, we want this reconsidered, if they appeal it. If it receives less than 2/3, then it doesn't matter, it will not be discussed or acted upon. But if it does receive 2/3, then you would cast another vote to do
say
adopt.
yes. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Just from a procedural perspective, that's how that would look.
Okay. And I'm taking that to be that I'm not gonna change my position here, there. I'm gonna go with what we've decided here. Is that, I'm more comfortable with that? If everybody's comfortable with that? Okay. And then maybe we could look at, you know, I love the idea of putting a resolution out there as a district. I don't know what that would be, but I love that idea. Okay. I wanted to do one for like the last every year. I even asked the timeline. I'm not sure what resolution it's going to be at, but I'd love to see us in here. Okay.
That wasn't bad. I think that was it.
Is there anything else?
That was it. Those are the two blocks
That's
of resolution.
There's nothing else like for 9 or.
Yeah, there's a whole other section that were not even presented, so.
But for appeal, we're not looking at.
No,
8, 9, or 10.
I'm sorry, yeah, I guess, I should clarify that. Were there any other ones in that block of 8 that the board should discuss?
I didn't have any. I had just a quick question, just because I'm not familiar with this. In resolution number 9, about current employees, what is LT's process when it comes to someone that's been here a long time? Because this was put in place in 2021, and I know there's high tenure here, so what has been?
Yeah, so any, like, face law would not apply to current employees, so we run that, we run any new employee through that, but not our current employees. So we would operate just like, every other school district does.
And what is that hesitation to not running someone through, like someone that's been here longer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a cumbersome process to determine where they worked before here. And I think we have other safeguards in place in terms of criminal background checks and sex offender databases, running them through that. So they go through all that process, just not when they were hired. This face law is fairly new, so we've not run those. And I don't know any districts. Do you guys do that? Or?
No, and I think the protections that maybe you're referencing is if somebody is determined to get on one of those lists, we're going to be notified right away that they can't be in school or work, right? Like if somebody is being charged.
Like if there is a change.
Yeah.
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 And I think too, concerns come up in other ways that require us to investigate or report and things like that. So, so we just don't, put current employees through that face law requirement.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. You feel good? I'm ready.
You know
Do
what
you have
you're
to appoint me though? Like, don't we have to move to appoint me? Because it says on here.
Maryland's already registered you on the website.
Right,
so-
but it says here though, you have, the next board members, you should discuss it, and then a sample motion for appointment may read as follows, on page 20. I'm really taking my job seriously.
We've not done that before.
Just letting you know.
We've not done that before, so I wouldn't wait. Yeah.
No one's contesting it.
No one's, no.
I mean, if somebody else wants it, I mean,
We did our straw poll, Mary.
There you go. All right.
Okay.
So how about instead, we get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Can we do that?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Let's go home.
It's a wrap.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Happy voting day
everybody.
tomorrow.
This, right?